South Africa's municipalities to find out how they've performed as the Auditor General is set to release their financial results. The KPMG and standoff to top the agenda when SARS appears before Parliament. Feasibility of moving Parliament from Cape Town to Pretoria is expected to feature in the Presidency's budget vote debate.
And later in sport, former champions Mamelodi Sundowns held to another draw in the group stages of the CAF Champions League.
Hello and welcome to SABC. You're watching Newsroom. I'm Shanti Yankee. Thank you very much for joining us this Wednesday morning. Coming up this hour, we delve more into the recent cash in transit heist and conversation. And of course, joining us via sports is Vena Kirtley, who is standing by. Very good morning to you, Velen. You well this morning?
Very well, thank you, Shanti. Good to be with you and good to be with our viewers. I look forward to bringing you a sports bulletin where we're not only speaking about the CAF Champions League, where unfortunately Mamelodi Sundowns lost out on a 2-1 win in the 83rd minute, but we're also going to be checking with the Indian Premier League, where a fantastic performance from Paf Duplessis saw the Chennai Super Kings into the final of the competition. That's coming your way at 1:45 to the hour. First, let's back to Shantae for your news.
In the lead story this morning, Auditor General Kimi Makwetu is this morning expected to release the audit results of the country's municipalities for the 2016-2017 financial year in Cape Town. Well, only 49 of the country's more than 250 municipalities received a clean audit for the 2015-2016 financial year. There has been an increase in irregular expenditure by just over 50% in municipalities, amounting to 16 billion rand. The Western Cape has shown the greatest fiscal prudence, receiving the most unqualified audits at 80%. Yesterday, the Treasury said several municipalities were under severe financial distress, with 64 having negative cash balances at the end of June 2017. Well, SARS is expected to brief the Finance Standing Committee on a number of prominent matters. The list includes the revenue that it's raised in the 2017-18 financial year. The briefing is also expected to cover the issues concerning SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane, its former top official, Jonas Magwakwa, as well as reports on KPMG and sign-off, amongst others. Well, this comes as President Cyril Ramaphosa removed Kate O'Regan as chair in Tom Moyane's disciplinary inquiry. She's been replaced by Azar Bam. Magwakwa is the subject of a Hawks investigation into alleged corruption and money laundering. Well, KPMG is still under intense scrutiny for the role it played in the so-called rogue unit report for SARS, and so is South African retailer Sanof, which has been embroiled in an accounting scandal. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to deliver the presidency's budget vote in Parliament today. Meanwhile, the final budget for this parliamentary term has been tabled. National Assembly Speaker Maleka Mbete says that Parliament will discuss the feasibility of moving from Cape Town to Pretoria. Abra Barbara reports.
It's not the first time that the feasibility of moving Parliament to Pretoria is discussed. National Assembly Speaker Maleka Mbete says the 6th Parliament will be doing further work on the proposal.
With respect to the proposal of relocating Parliament from Cape Town to Pretoria, an external service provider, Pamoja Pty Ltd, has been appointed to conduct a 6-month socio-economic and impact study commencing this month.
Of the more than 2.4 billion rand allocated to Parliament, nearly R500 million is set aside for MPs' remuneration. Mbete says the institution's ability to perform its constitutional obligations have been impacted by the budget shortfall of 476 million rand. MPs are also concerned about the performance of the institution.
The days that people could run away without consequences are over. You cannot steal public money without facing consequences. The public wants to see that Parliament exercises its authority and pushes ahead with the necessary oversight over executive.
Parliament is obligated by the Constitution to oversee the work of the executive. Parliament can and should continuously enhance its oversight work. The continued rise in irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure of public money suggests that we are not as effective as we should.
Despite the concerns about Parliament's ability to perform its oversight vigorously, Mbete also highlighted some of the gains the institution has made. The adoption of legislation regulating funding for political parties, which aims to promote transparency in this democracy, is regarded as a positive for the institution. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule will at midday address the media on the latest developments in the Northwest. The media briefing, which will take place at Luthuli House, is likely to focus on the political future of the province's embattled Premier Supra Momopilu. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed an interministerial committee to investigate the governance problems in the province. Momopilu has reneged on his pledge to resign and has instead taken a leave of absence and appointed Finance MEC Wendy Nelson as the acting Premier. The Northwest recently saw violent protests as residents demanded the removal of Momopilu, who they accused of corruption and not doing enough to deliver basic services. Well, according to South African Banking Risk Information Centre, SABC, since January this year, cash and transit heists have increased by more than 100% compared to the same period last year. Well, 378 incidents were reported back in 2017. South Africa has experienced an increase of these robberies lately, in which organized gangs using commercial explosives attack vans transporting cash with military precision. And on the latest incidents, 2 cash vans were bombed in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg. From East London, we are now joined by Annelies Burgess, author of the book South Africa Cash in Transit Epidemic Uncovered. A very good morning to Annelies. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, what can we attribute to the increase in some of the cash and transit heists that we've seen in South Africa over the past couple of weeks or a year?
Yes, I think this, what I call the epidemic, has actually been brewing for a much longer time than we realize. In 2014, we had 180 cases of cash and transit crime, and as you rightly said in your intro, at the end of last year we had 378, which was a 100% increase over 3 years. I think the latest surge that we are seeing is also has to do with the fact that it's become more visible. So we are more aware of cash and transit crime, and the question of what is behind cash and transit crime is simple. The criminals that we interviewed and spoke about in my book say the reason they do cash and transit crime is because it's easy, it's incredibly lucrative, it's easy access to big amounts of money, and there are very few consequences, so it's low risk. And until we make it a higher risk for these criminals, we will see this continuing to increase.
Essentially, South Africa is somewhat, a very developed country, specifically in Africa. Why are we still using a mode of transport by road as a way to transport money?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's been asked a number of times this week. What we need to understand is that South Africa is a cash economy. 60% of people in South Africa are still unbanked. Around 80% of all transactions in South Africa are still in cash. So the economy needs cash to operate. I've asked that question many times of people in the industry in the past year of writing this book. And they've said, look, it would be very easy to stop cash and transit crime in its tracks if we started using helicopters, for instance. But from a cost point of view, that's completely impossible. We must remember that cash and transit companies are also, they are private companies, and there's huge pressure on them to also contain their costs. It's something we haven't spoken about a lot over the past week, but the pressure on pricing for these cash and transit companies is extraordinary. In 1999, client who used a cash and transit company would have paid around 3,000 Rand for a pickup 6 times a week. And that price has now come down to around 1,500 Rand. If we look at what an armoured vehicle would have cost in 1999, it would have been around 250,000 Rand. That price for an armoured vehicle has now gone up to around R1 million. So there's an extraordinary pressure on these cash and transit companies in terms of cost. And there really isn't another option. If we want our economy to operate and to work, we need to keep the cash moving through the arteries of our economy.
Yeah. You know, what are the chances that an organized syndicate is being behind these attacks? You know, specifically taking into account the caliber of weapons that are being used, the getaway cars, and the number of people that we're seeing be involved?
The thing about cash in transit crime, and we need to make a distinction between 2 types of cash in transit crime. On the one hand are these dramatic, what we call vehicle on road attacks, the ones that we saw in Boksburg and the ones that we see, you know, surfacing in social media quite often these days. But then there's another kind of cash in transit crime where the real growth is actually taking place, and this is called cross-pavement attacks, where the security officials of these companies are being attacked when they leave the armoured vehicles on their way to the ATMs or banks or retailers where the money is taken to or fetched from. But the important thing about all cash and transit crime is that it's very organised. So these are very professional outfits, these gangs that perpetrate this crime. These aren't your garden variety opportunistic criminals that are just out to make a fast buck. These guys see themselves as businessmen. They say so. We interviewed people, or we at least quote people that were interviewed in prison, and they're very proud of their professionalism in terms of this. So yes, of course, these gangs recruit specialists in the field. They recruit specialists in terms of hijacking the required vehicles to be used in these attacks. They recruit people who are specialists in handling firearms. They recruit specialists in terms of intelligence. They recruit police officers to help on the scene, to run interference, to help them get away, and even afterwards to help keep these cases out of court. So we are not dealing with ordinary criminals, and that is why the response to this crime is going to have to be a very organized, a very focused response. And cash and transit companies who run their own vast intelligence networks are going to have to work very closely with the police, and they're going to have to pool their resources, and they're going to have to come at this in a very organized, very professional way, because they're dealing with professionals.
Let's talk about then the possibility then of police and military involvement. If we have a look at the cases that have taken place in just the recent month or so, having a look at the ammunition that is being used, having a look at the type of bomb material that's being used, and also having noticed that many, specifically in the past couple of weeks, many of the drivers of the security vans as well as the security personnel have not seemed to be injured in some of the reports. So let's have a look at the involvement of that.
Okay, so the important thing to understand is that very few of these attacks happen or can happen without the active involvement of someone inside the company. The criminals call them fingermen or fingers, and these are people who provide information on where the vans are going, how much money is being carried, and so forth. So that's the one common thread that goes through all cash and transit incidents. The issue of guns that are being used, it's not difficult in South Africa to access guns. We are seeing our country is drowning in illegal guns, and the cash and transit criminals that we spoke to, are very clear about the fact that that's the least of their worries, to lay their hands on guns. They use AK-47s. They like them because they say it instills a sense of fear in people, and it's a very reliable weapon. And R4s and R5s, they say, are used because they're easy to get. And those weapons we see they are stolen from the police. They are stolen in crime incidents. So cash in transit crime essentially is a gun problem, I think, or at least one of the big issues is that we're dealing with a gun problem. I think the issue of the professionalism that we saw in the Boksburg incident that we have all been grabbed by, it was a very chilling aspect of that crime, the way these people operated with almost military training. I've heard that General Johan Boysen, who was the former head of the Hawks in KwaZulu-Natal and is now the head of investigations for fidelity, he has actually now gone on the record and says that he thinks police and soldiers are involved. My research does not indicate that there's a huge involvement of trained soldiers, but this is a crime virus that adapts. I talk about a mutating virus that constantly adapts to new circumstances. It changes as the circumstances change. So maybe there is a new development where there are soldiers and trained people who have been trained militarily are starting to be recruited by these gangs, but I don't think that is necessarily what is happening. We must remember that these gangs are professionals. They are very good at what they do and they train themselves.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Very insightful. That was Annelies Burgess, author of the book South Africa Cash in Transit Epidemic Uncovered, unpacking the recent cash in transit heist and some of the details and characteristics around that. Some other news stories this morning. The South African Police Service is expected to brief Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police. One of the issues on the agenda is the Ingcobo police station massacre. A group of 6 men are facing 5 counts of murder, attempted murder, robbery with aggravating circumstances and illegal possession of firearms. The criminals and their charges relate to the murders of 4 police officers and an off-duty soldier at the Ingcobo police station earlier this year. The suspects are believed to be members of the Seven Angels Ministries Church. Also, residents of Ventersdorp near Potchefstroom in the northwest are pinning their hopes on President Cyril Ramaphosa to intervene in their service delivery challenges by demerging them from the newly amalgamated JB Marks Municipality. They want the erstwhile Ventersdorp local municipality to be re-established as an independent municipality from the former Tlokwe municipality. Well, the ailing Ventersdorp local municipality was launched and merged with Tlokwe in 2016 to form JB Marks local municipality before the local government elections.
The home of a world-renowned struggle stalwart and communist John Beaver Marks, a far cry from the envisioned breath of hope, as its largely rural community continues to struggle to access basic services, including water and electricity. Now, fed up, residents have written to the presidency to demand their municipality back.
When you go to the tap, there is no water. When you just sit watching TV or just busy cooking, the electricity went off without notice. I don't know what's going on.
There is nothing that is happening whatsoever. All the officials have been moved to Potch. There's no one with authority in Ventersdorp. We have to travel over 50 kilometers to go and complain.
Local businesses have also been affected as the town's biggest entrepreneurs struggle to balance making profit and keeping their businesses afloat.
Where we are situated, water shortages or total collapse of water happens daily. So a distillery, running a distillery, you need water to do that. So I had to invest in water carts to cart water from the Skoonspruit to my premises.
My business on my side, if I don't have electricity on the Wimpy, on the Debonairs, I must retrench people because there's no electricity. Now I had to invest hundreds and thousands of rands in generators in order to supply and give customer services.
Meanwhile, some residents, like 80-year-old Kidibone Makok, find themselves in a very precarious situation since the newly electricity meters were installed, unduly enjoying illegally connected electricity.
So at any time, I see you, but I have to mutlung. But I don't like Corona Tipile. Because I'm like a tip, but I'll tip it. So Motagaso on no thing on to regular bail.
Meanwhile, the JB Marks local municipality has downplayed all concerns, hailing the merger between Clock and Ventersdorp as a winning step to better service delivery and rate collections.
There was an outstanding amount of 58 million that was owed by the Eskom, by Ventersdorp region to Eskom. And that money has been paid to, so far we've paid more than 48 million of that. Secondly, there's a lot of illegal connection that is taking place in Ventersdorp, and it's a pity and it's so bad that some of our council officials are involved in actually connecting, doing the illegal connection. And I can tell you that we're going to arrest them, we will find them.
The municipality has confirmed that a memorandum of demands served to it by the community has been sent to the presidency. Sintle English, SABC News, Ventersdorp.
Well, on our question today, we're asking you, what do you make of SASSA's irregular expenditure amounting to an extraordinary 1.3 billion rand during the 2016-2017 financial year? You can send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom on Twitter. We'll have a look at some of your comments more after the break.
Nations, 44 matches live on SABC1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
Technology is used for both positive and negative.
Some governments block the internet in times of protest.
With this internet blackout, it's impossible for me to do it, so I have to travel to Douala.
This act is a true violation of the rights of citizens.
In Africa, people are always coming up with innovative ways to use technology to solve some of their problems.
The more interesting piece of technology is actually the artificial intelligence.
AI, it's utilizing data to make your life easier.
On Network, we'll give you Africa's technology and social media news.
Catch Network with Spumelele Zondi every Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
Corruption both in the public and the private sectors needs to be combated.
Where there are clear cases of wrong that has been done, that must commence immediately.
Something is being done about corruption in our country.
Currency, even although it's strengthened dramatically after the ANC's recent electoral conference, could conceivably go stronger yet.
He had a soul that would not be for sale.
Stay tuned to Your World for your final news roundup, Monday to Sunday at 21:30.
Is of course, so what do you make of SASSA's irregular expenditure amounting to 1.3 billion rand during the 2016-2017 financial year, specifically on what that money was actually spent on? We've asked you to send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of your tweets. Mandile says former Minister Batabile Dlamini should shoulder the chaos. She was very stubborn and must be taken to task about this debacle. Olani says, well, this happened right under the nose of Batabile Dlamini. Hawks must investigate and bring the culprits to the book. And Patejo says Batabile Dlamini should be arrested. She's corrupt. Very different views there, specifically on what that money was spent on in the financial year. Let's have a look at our poll question. Auditor General Kimi Makweto is expected to release the audit results of the country's municipalities for the 2016-2017 financial year. We're asking you, do you think your municipality has performed better? Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Having a look at the poll, 80% of you are saying no, 20% of you are saying yes. In terms of your tweets this morning, we'll start off with Tabo saying, even though Zanin municipality is not always on the front pages of the daily newspaper, I don't think it will perform better. Robert Martin says, down here in Cape Town, the city is not doing bad, but they only have to keep politics out of service. Definitely, we're going to have to wait and see what comes out of that Auditor General's briefing with regards to a post-back feedback on the budget, as well as how municipalities have performed in the 2016 and 2017 financial year. Let's move on to our Facebook page this morning at SABC Newsroom. Firstly, the African National Congress says it is confident that it has been handling the issue of land redistribution properly and at an acceptable pace. And then sports. Bloemfontein Celtic supporters have expressed shock that the club is up for sale. The team owner Max Shabalala says he can barely keep his head above water. Shabalala says the cost of running the PSL club has been unbearable over the last 4 years. And finally abroad, 14 priests involved in a sex abuse scandal in Chile, which has rocked Pope Francis's papacy, was defrocked yesterday. You can find out this and more on our Facebook page or visit our SABC News website. Well, still ahead, coming up, we do know that Mpumalanga Health Department expresses confidence that malaria will be a thing of the past by 2020. This and more when we come back.
32 nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
News at 9. We go beyond the headlines of the day and breaking news to bring you all the angles and in-depth analysis of stories that impact your life. We are on the ball with all economic stories. Our bureaus around the globe are ready to connect you to events as and when they happen. So join us every day at 9 to zoom in on the day's big stories.
Mpumalanga Health Department expresses confidence that malaria will be a thing of the past by 2020. United Nations secures the release of over 200 children or child soldiers by the country's armed groups. Somalia floods claim a dozen lives and displace hundreds. Well, leading at the top of the hour, or the half hour, the Department of Health in Mpumalanga is optimistic that it will eliminate malaria by the year 2020. Well, this despite the province recording a high number of malaria cases since April last year. Mpumalanga recorded over 9,000 cases and 14 deaths. The province commemorated World Malaria Day in the Komazi area near Mozambique border.
Commemorating World Malaria Day under the theme Ready to Beat Malaria. The aim is to raise awareness on malaria prevention and control. The Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces recorded a high number of cases last year.
When we look back from 2017 April, we have had about 9,360 cases. And if you look at Nkomazi specifically, we're talking about 3,413 cases that we have seen.
The problem that we have, we take time to go and consult, and at some point it becomes late when they detect it. But through this campaign to say, if you feel you have a headache, you have a flu, quickly go and consult before you can think of taking the issue of consulting to traditional healers.
Community members have heeded government's call, taking advantage of government facilities to test for malaria. 28-year-old Mthandeni Mbebe does regular checks because she stays in a high-risk area near the Mozambique border.
Malaria is a killer disease. That's why it is important to always test. Even at clinics, they encourage us to test.
Non-governmental organizations are also reaching out to communities.
We have nurses in the borders or in the border areas, in the farms. They operate on a daily basis. They go there, they test the people. When they test the people, if they pick a positive case, we then investigate the case to where is the source of this parasite.
Fever, night sweats and fatigue are some of the malaria symptoms. People are encouraged to test as soon as there is a show of these symptoms. Mweli Maslela, SABC News, Gamhlushwa in Mpumalanga.
South African news. In an effort to promote good relations between South Africa and Nigeria, the Consul General of Nigeria will today meet with Nigerians living in Mpumalanga to encourage them to obey the laws of this country. Godwin Adama says there is a need to confront the realities on the ground. He says as a country it is painful to always get reports that one of its citizens is dead. Adama says it's important to create a conducive environment for locals and foreign nationals to interact. We're staying with African news as we move over to Sudan. Armed groups in South Sudan have released 210 children in Jonglei State's Pibor area as part of efforts by UN agencies and other partners to get warring parties to stop recruiting child soldiers. But ensuring former child soldiers have access to education and jobs remains a challenge.
About 728 South Sudanese child soldiers have been released from the armed forces so far, but reintegrating them into their communities remains a task. Many were recruited by force, while others say they had no choice but to head into the bush to fight because their parents were killed and they had no other way to survive. They exchanged their guns and military fatigues in favor of a starter kit, which includes books, pens, clothes, bed sheets, a mosquito net, and other essential items. Most of the children are from the ranks of the Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition. Ensuring the children get an access to education and jobs to deter recruitment remains a challenge.
It does not make sense for someone to say that they are defending the rights of the children and that's why they are fighting. Or they are defending the future of the children, and that's why they are fighting. They are defending the future of the country, and that's why they are fighting. But you cannot defend the future if you are destroying the future, because children are the future. So let us work together, shoulder to shoulder, and ensure that we make our words into actions.
South Sudan has been mired in conflict since 2013 when troops loyal to President Salva Kiir clashed with troops loyal to then Vice President Riek Machar.
Well, at least a dozen people have been killed and hundreds of homes destroyed following record rains and flooding in the Somali capital Mogadishu. About 300 homes were also destroyed by tropical cyclone Sagar, causing an estimated $35 million in losses. According to the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the rainfall was the heaviest Somalia has seen in over 30 years. Authorities say at least 15 people were killed on Sunday after heavy rains and flooding hit the Lugaya and Baki districts in northwestern Awdal region. United Nations Security Council negotiations on a draft resolution continue behind closed doors in New York. The meeting aims to create a UN protection force for Palestinian civilians, despite growing skepticism that it would be vetoed by the United States. The Kuwaiti-sponsored draft resolution also demands, amongst others, that Israel cease military reprisals and the unlawful use of force against civilians. Palestine's foreign minister earlier asked prosecutors at the International Criminal Court to launch a full investigation to the allegations of Israel human rights abuses on Palestinian territory.
The referral gives the prosecutor of the ICC the legal basis to move beyond a preliminary examination of alleged crimes committed in the occupied territories that the Hague-based court started in 2015.
This referral is Palestine's test to the international mechanism of accountability and respect for international law. The international community created an order anchored in the values of universal human rights and respect for the law, and it created mechanisms, including the ICC, to ensure the supremacy of these values. Failing to afford the Palestinian people the same rights to justice and redress that all other people are entitled to will undermine this order and these mechanisms. Further delaying justice for Palestinian victims is also tantamount to denial of justice, and that is unacceptable. We will not allow injustice to be Palestine's destiny.
Israel has rejected the ICC move as legally invalid, arguing the court lacks jurisdiction because the Palestinian Authority is not a state, while Israel abides by international law. In New York, no clarity on where parties stand on the draft after a first round of negotiations on Monday.
We continue to negotiate with our colleagues in the Council, in particular to get more information about what precisely is intended by, for example, a protection mission, what that means, and we'll carry on having those negotiations.
But is it something the UK would support, a protection mission?
So, as I say, at this stage, we need to have more detail about what exactly is planned, what's proposed. That's not yet clear to me.
Non-permanent member Bolivia says it fully supports the Palestinian moves at the ICC and the Kuwaiti draft, but had choice words for the United States.
The difference between what do I expect and what will happen. We expect from every single member state to uphold international law, to comply with the resolutions of the Security Council, but it seems that they believe that they are above international law.
He also said they hope to have the resolution put to a vote sooner rather than later, but these will be tough negotiations given the current US administration's defense of any criticism directed at Israel by the Security Council. A statement by Israel's ambassador Danny Danon called the Kuwaiti draft dangerous and that only reinforces the terror regime of Hamas that oppresses and threatens the residents of Gaza and the security of Israeli citizens. Shervin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
To wrap up of some of the news, at least, but now let's cross over to the sporting desk with Valen this morning.
Thank you very much, Shante. Well, we're actually going to be bringing you a bulletin after the break, but we've got the sport question that we're asking this morning, and it's related to one of our top stories about Mamelodi Sundowns and their participation in the CAF Champions League. It's currently in the group stages. Mamelodi Sundowns are in Group C along with the defending champions Wydad Casablanca. Sundowns, after 2 matches, they've only managed 2 draws. So we're asking, do you think Sundowns will be able to make it past the group stages of the CAF Champions League? We're inviting your comments at SABC Newsroom. Okay, we'll take a break now. When we return, we've got your sport.
32 nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
A very good morning to you, and thank you so much indeed for choosing Morning Live.
But I want to know the basic thing.
Griselda Lewis, SABC News, in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Zimbabwe, Mzondele Mbeje, SABC News, Luanda, Angola.
Let's take a look at your market indicators.
Thanks for staying with Morning Live. Let's bring you your sports news.
Let's take a look at your satellite image.
Set the agenda for the day with Morning Live.
robots, automation and artificial intelligence are becoming an increasingly important part of our lives.
We love the term disruptive technologies.
Parents and caregivers are taking part in Facebook.
On Network, we give you Africa's technology and social media news.
My favorite piece of technology is the microwave.
The reason why I can't live without my cell phone is because I do everything on my cell phone.
For all your technology news, catch Network with Spumelele Zondi on Saturdays at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with Newsroom. Let's bring you your sports news. South Africa's Faf du Plessis smashed an unbeaten 67 to lead the Chennai Super Kings into the Indian Premier League final with a thrilling 2-wicket win over the Sunrisers Hyderabad. Chasing 140 for victory, Chennai were in a shambles at 62 for 6 when du Plessis stepped up with his 42-ball blitz that made the two-time champions achieve their target with 5 balls to spare in the first qualifier in Mumbai. Let's continue with football news. Mamelodi Sundowns played to a 2-2 draw against their host Horoya Athletic Club in their African Champions League Group C clash in Guinea. Peter Musmane and his men remain in third place on the log as Horoya and defending champions Wydad Casablanca are at the top with 4 points each. The group stage continues with the third round of matches on the 17th of July. Sundowns lost out on taking all the points when the Guineans' captain Abubakar Kamara scored the equaliser on 83 minutes.
The humidity and the heat of Guinea. Chance, yeah! Prima makes the save. This might be a chance now. Manko on this right-hand side. Ball through the legs of the defender. Cross the face of goal. It's still alive. Hosseini Kamara takes the quick throw in. Bit of hesitation there with Aransa. Struck the upright. Did Okan say? Much physically stronger than him. Maybe not as skillful, but they muscling their way. Has another chance. Goal! Deservedly so too for Okansi Mandela. Now Tau is in. Tau surely now. Stuck away. They've got the equaliser. Much better. Sereno, great run from Billiard. Oh, that must be a penalty. And surely a red card. Here comes the penalty. Sereno, expertly taken. Sundowns in the lead. Now it's on the near side. Equaliser. That defence was completely disorganised for the set piece. And a big, strong, powerful header puts Arroyo right back in the game.
In European football news now, defending champions Real Madrid say they have the utmost respect for Liverpool, their opponents, in this weekend's UEFA Champions League final, which takes place in Kiev in the Ukraine. Real are the overwhelming favourites and are bidding to win a third successive Champions League title. Meanwhile, England captain Harry Kane is confident his team can return from Russia with the World Cup.
Real are aiming to be the first team since Bayern Munich in 1976 to win the title 3 times in a row. But the Spanish super club says there's no doubt that Liverpool is equally hungry for the trophy. Real know what it's like to play in the competition's final, a privilege no player in the current Liverpool squad has experienced. The Spaniards remain cautiously optimistic, despite being tipped to walk away with the crown.
Bueno, me impone el Liverpool, ¿no?
Liverpool inspire respect from me. They have a very complete team in general, not only on the offensive line. Firmino, Salah and other players can make the difference. We have studied them and we know where we can harm them. Let's hope we have a great day and that they don't.
Sabemos por dónde intentar meterle mano, ¿no? Ojalá.
Madrid are the most successful team in Champions League history. They've won the title 12 times before. Liverpool have lifted the trophy 5 times. Meanwhile, England will go to the World Cup in Russia with a young squad and lowered expectations from the public. At 24, Kane is England's youngest ever World Cup captain, but says his team has what it takes.
Although we've got a kind of a younger team, maybe a less experienced team, it's still, when we get out there, the fans are going to expect us to win, especially the first couple of group games, and we expect ourselves to win as well. So But that's part of the experience. That's part of planning a World Cup, is to feel that pressure and see how you cope under it.
England have won the World Cup only once, in 1966, and joined Belgium, Tunisia and Panama in Group G.
It's going to be extremely hard. There's some really, really good teams in the World Cup, but it's worth fighting for. Like I say, them dreams of lifting it, I'm sure we've all had them, and it's an opportunity for us, so we're going to fight and give it everything we got.
The World Cup kicks off on the 14th of next month. England will get their campaign underway against Tunisia in Volgograd 4 days later. Liesel Sankel, SABC News.
Bloemfontein Celtic supporters have expressed their shock that the club is up for sale. Team owner Max Shabalala says he could barely keep his head above water. The cost of running the PSL club has been unbearable over the last 4 years.
Shabalala took over control of Celtic in July 2014. He bought it from long-time owner and former player Jimmy Augusti. Shabalala has had love-hate relationship with the supporters. In March 2016, Shabalala, a property developer, threatened to sell the club. The Green and White have been in a dire financial strait since. The situation became so bad that players and the technical staff embarked on a strike over unpaid bonuses and signing on fees. To add insult into injury, a cellular company has pulled out as the team's main sponsor. The performance on the field of play has also waned. Celtic failed to finish in the lucrative top 8 in the ABSA Premiership for 3 years in a row. And Siwelele supporters are not impressed.
We have to have something that represents us. Now, if they sell this thing, I mean, where's our pride, you know? Where's our image? Where's our image as Bloemfontein fans?
We can't sell Bloemfontein Celtics. Yeah, we are going to lose our power.
Despite the staggering cost of running the Premier Club, potential buyers have come on board. Last year, Shabalala promised that the club will stay in the province in honor of its late former owner, Petros Whitehead Molemela. And the Free State government injected 2 million rand into the club's coffers, but it wasn't enough to keep the wolves from the door. Shabalala has declined to comment, but confirmed that the club is up for sale. Ishmael Mudiba in Bloemfontein.
In cycling news, Britain's Simon Yates took another step towards winning the Giro d'Italia after coming through the stage 16 time trial with a 56-second overall lead. Australian Rohan Dennis of BMC Racing took a blistering victory at the 34.2 kilometre course from Trento to Rovereto, but it was Mitchelton Scott's Yates who deserved all the plaudits for another gutsy ride. Team Sunweb's Tom Dumoulin, the World Time Trial champion, was expected to take a huge chunk out of Yates' lead, but the Dutchman finished 22 seconds adrift of Dennis in third spot as his hopes of retaining the title took a hit. Yates, who had started the day 2 minutes and 11 seconds ahead of Dumoulin in the Maglia Rosa, was delighted to have held on to the pink jersey. Four-time Tour de France champion Chris Froome delivered a solid performance to finish the stage 5th and move back up to 4th in the general classification, 3 minutes and 50 seconds behind Yates. And a far-flung community in Swellendam in the Overberg region of the Western Cape has benefited from the National Department of Sport and Recreation's program of developing sporting infrastructure in rural areas. Sports Minister Thokozile Xasa has handed over a R7 million sports clubhouse to the Railton community. This is one of many projects funded through a R300 million municipal infrastructure grant which has been allocated to the department.
Engaging youth in the form of sports. The upgrade to the sports ground includes a clubhouse, grandstands and ablution facilities. The promotion and development of sport and recreation in disadvantaged areas is a priority for the department. These new facilities may unearth new sporting talent.
It is one of our pilots as the department to bring to the smaller towns a facility that would enable schools and communities as well as the municipality to have a facility that would be accessible and have young people afforded an opportunity to show their talent.
The community has welcomed the initiative.
This facility here is so much symbolic because in a sense is that we are sitting with our community here. Resources are not in abundance for us, so which means us thanks a lot to the sport ministry, to everybody involved, bringing this facility to our community.
The department says it is their mission to equalize sport opportunities for all and to develop the talent of children in particular from neglected communities. Segui Chetty, SABC News, Swellendam in the Overberg region of the Western Cape.
That concludes your sports in this hour here on Newsroom. Your weather is up next.
SARS is briefing the Finance Standing Committee on a number of prominent matters we crossed our mind.
To confirm the donation from Zimbabwe, and did it include the 450,000 cash deposits into Elsky's account? And those kind of third party. What I'm trying to illustrate is not just Bakwakwa, where the third parties that were named in the PwC and Hogan Lovells report, were their tax affairs also investigated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, who's next?
Nati. Thank you. No, thank you very much, Chairperson. HR versus tax approach investigation. And I'm just posing this. Of course, it's not necessarily a question, but more of a comment, and perhaps I also do want to solicit your thinking on this one. Earlier on, we had alluded to the divide between SARS being a taxman and SARS being an employer, and I do think that that's where your answer lies when you deal with this particular question, because I wouldn't have thought that human resources management was wrong, for an example, in its approach, precisely because it was dealing with an employee in this particular instance and so on. So don't you think that that's exactly where the issue lies, in a sense, as opposed to, oh, well, what we should have done is just merely a tax investigation approach as opposed to an HR approach. Now, from an institutional point of view, I think HR was correct in then saying this employee is reported to have transgressed, and therefore these are the steps that we are instituting to investigate this particular matter. So I just wanted to throw that one in. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Tandy.
Chair, there's complexities of the matter, and the complexities lies between the role of SARS as an institution that collects tax, and the role of SARS investigating an official within it. So there needs to be a distinction. There needs to be how you separate it, including what can SARS investigate. So we need to be all at one in terms of understanding that. And it's good that you explained it, that you can investigate tax evasion. Money laundering is the competence of other institutions, because the FIC takes a report and gives it to investigating officers if they suspect there's been money laundering. That's how we deal with it in terms of the Procedure Act in the South African
Andy, don't you want to bring the mic towards you?
I've got this old computer. You're going to donate your computer.
So because you got a big computer, we must now strain our ears.
Yeah,
Frank, is that constitutional and legal? No, he says no, right? Can we carry on, please? Nati, we do everything legally here.
Yeah, no. Don't get involved with somebody between me and him. Don't get involved.
No, you can.
So you see, that distinction should be made at all times, so that we understand what can be investigated within the parameters of SARS, lest we are found wanting in litigation. And it's based on what I raised when we in V226 about the secrecy laws we have in South Africa that might at some point need to be reviewed. Well, review in law, my son said it means something else. I must stop saying review. Review means something in law. So for lawyers, don't take it literally. A review in a layman terms, it means it needs to be relooked at. So we need to apply our mind. I once dealt with a case that was discussed internally. Once you discuss a case that needs to be investigated internally, you are blurring the lines, especially if it's discussed by people who might be witnesses at some point. So we need to understand that from the onset and explain it and know what we can deal with here today and what can be dealt with differently based on the scope and the mandate of a commission that will come into place to deal with the finer details of the matters. Because once you get to a space that can't be dealt with at this level, then the subsequent result is going to be litigation. So I want us not to take an approach, Chair, that says who was right, who was wrong, but to identify where the mistake was that took shape and needs to be corrected in the immediate, so that you clean the system from biasness of any sort or perceived biasness of some sort moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, fine. Respond, please, Marcus. Mark. What? Yeah, it's your constitutional right.
You know, there are people who, this is the acting
commissioner. Yeah.
Commissioner. People who said that you don't have qualifications on anything and that you just jumped over people who have got qualifications. Do you have any qualification on anything? Post-secondary qualification or even secondary qualification? Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Mark.
Okay.
You have to speak into the mic, of course, yes. Thank you.
Yes, let me deal with the first question. And there were some parliamentary questions relating to my qualification, that I didn't have a matric. It was something going around Twitter. I've got a Bachelor of Administration from UNISA, and I do have a matric from Clapham High School in Pretoria, for the record. I've been at SARS for 34 years, and I think those that know me, I'm a taxman at heart. I've worked through most of the organisation. That being said,
I'd like to ask you why you look so young, but I won't.
It doesn't look like a person who doesn't have a matric.
It doesn't look like he's been there for 34 years.
No, but never mind.
Chair, with regards to the member's question with regards to being held accountable, that is work in process, and I think it would be inappropriate at this point, given where we are, what the Chair said earlier with regards to the current processes that are underway, to go further. I am obviously, if people did wrong, we will hold them to account, and I want to assure you of that. At this point, nobody has been disciplined or anything with regards to this process within SARS as we sit here today. But I'm very aware that if wrongdoing is found, we will do it. We'll set it right. My modus operandi is very much that we hold people to account, but on the other side, we look after our staff and ensure that our staff are protected, because that is something that's very worrisome to me, which it will come out maybe later in the day as we engage. With regards to the investigation which the member raised, what are we doing? I can't go into that, Chair. It would be in total breach for me to do that. But I know that some people might doubt my integrity being here today. I can assure you I will do what is right with regards to any investigation without fear and favour. What one does need to, and before somebody says, well, are you investigating A, B, and C and other things that are out there, SARS has to prioritise all its resources. And I just want us as to understand that. So we don't investigate every complaint we get. We get thousands upon thousands of complaints. We don't investigate every complaint. But I want to assure you, on this matter and other matters that are out there, we will do what is right to ensure that the fisc is not done in, and that criminals are held to account. I cannot go beyond that at this point in time. With regards to the differentiation, Chair, with regards to HR, the employer, and the tax man, it's an ongoing struggle we have, Chair. And one of the key things, and one of the recommendations we still need to implement, is in our conditions of employment that we hold that if staff are found to be doing tax in a manner that detracts, in other words, is illegal, that they must be held to discipline. In our staff code today, we hold people that they've got to be tax compliant. My challenge, and as I think the member, Mr. Lees, knows, tax compliance looks at return, filing, and payment of debt. That is not true compliance. I believe that we need compliance beyond that. That means I'm declaring all my income and I'm reflecting that correctly. And if not, I believe that a SARS employee should be held to account in that regard. And I want to implement that. It hasn't been. It is a recommendation that we want to do, and it will require, obviously, engagement with our staff, but that compliance be a mandate for being an employee at SARS. It just makes sense. How can it be otherwise, Chair? In terms of the comments made further, I don't think there was any question in that. I note them. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Who are you?
I'm Newsroom from Hogan Lovells.
Yeah, no, we will come to you at an appropriate time. I'm moving on to the Hogan Lovells report time. Basically, okay, so you're done, right? Right. Now, does anybody else want to say anything about this Makwakwa matter before we look at the Hogan Lovells report specifically? No. Okay.
We are satisfied with what we have and what we cannot deal with currently. I think we are content that we cannot be able to discuss the matter.
Essentially, we are consistent with yesterday's meeting. We cannot preempt the outcomes. But surely we want to say something like this, that this investigation, this disciplinary inquiry into the commissioner should be expedited, should be completed reasonably soon in a fair and appropriate manner, and that we request both the government and Commissioner Moyane to cooperate to ensure this happens. Can't we take, tomorrow can you note this, right? I'm suggesting we can't just hang in the air. In other words, we should be very careful about saying that there are processes out there, and we shouldn't be inconsistent. In other words, we mustn't jump up and down inconsistently. Based on what this committee has said over the last 4 years, it seems reasonable to me, Thandi, to suggest that we say, while we recognize that at this stage, the committee cannot consider the matter fully. We urge, now I'm trying to word the thing, we urge that the government, is it correct to say government? The government and Commissioner Moyane cooperate in the public interest to ensure an expeditious and fair outcome, following which the committee will consider the matter further. So it's not hanging in the air, we must be Parliament. Is that agreeable? Right, so that's more or less the wording, right? I'll draft it
Chair,
out.
can you please draft it for us so that
I'll draft it out and issue it as a statement by the committee, not by any political party which claims to speak on behalf of the committee.
Chair, that's why I want us to
again
do
this
it,
morning,
because I want
but I don't want to enter that. I'll issue a statement to say that the decisions made yesterday were done by the committee as a whole. The decision done on Marcus Euster was actually decided first by 4 committees, not any party, and so on. So I'll have to do all of that, but that's my work. But let's move to this. It is a committee decision. I will draft any party is free. Mr. Floyd Chivambo, you can speak on Radio Mongolia and whatever you want on behalf of your party, but the committee's statement is issued by the committee. It's a committee decision moved by Tandi, is that right? Right. Seconder, we're going to do it like that now. That'll be a committee. Nati, you moved, seconded, right? Is that correct?
Once we send the draft,
right.
Chair, I want to make a further proposal.
Yeah.
That the statement is issued before the end of this meeting.
Yeah, so that it goes out as a committee thing. We keep having this issue. We have no problems with people speaking on behalf of their committees. I mean, of their parties, but they can't speak on behalf of the committee. Right, can we move on to the second issue, which is the Hogan Lovells report. Now, after a titanic struggle, the committee, no particular party, the committee got that report. Right, now, we acknowledge that the whole matter of Mr. Makwakwa, we said it before, were it not for the DA. Can I repeat, Nati, since you were not here? It was the DA that raised the issue first in August 2016. We did not know what was, that's correct. The committee can even acknowledge that. You honest, we'll say that. We'll acknowledge the DA raised that matter first. We didn't know what they were talking about and who they were talking about. You know, the gentleman they're talking about is sitting right there. Right, so that is correct. That's accurate. But it's the committee that has taken this resolution. Now, on the Hogan Lovells report, the committee decided on that, as mandated to the chair. Now, on that matter, we have the report. It's over to you. Zakele Shlope was asked to do a summary of it. A million things happened between then, and then the commission was removed or suspended. Zakele, did you do us an overview? And do you want to just give us a quick overview, if you have done so, and then we throw it open to committee members to say what they want?
No, Chair, I remember we talked about this and we said because the report is so short, it's better for members to read the whole report. It was about 14 pages.
No, I mean the whole Hogan's Lovells, the thick one.
The report itself is very short. The other things are annexures.
I read this earlier, right? Yeah. But I know that Treasury got the report, am I correct, from us, because the Commissioner refused to give it to you. Is that correct, as Treasury? Can you explain?
Chair, the Hogan Lovells report was refused to Minister Gordon when he was Minister, before he was fired. It was not given to Minister Gigaba, despite many requests. And even when it was promised that Mr. Moyane would give it to you on that Friday, I think just before he was suspended, we waited and waited, but the ministry did not get a copy. So I had to contact you, as you know, just to confirm to get a copy of the report. So that's how we've got a copy, and if it does help the committee, I can just walk you through some issues which might just help the discussion as well.
Yeah, well, you were supposed to just give us a quick overview from your perspective. That is the perspective of the executive, not Parliament.
Yes, yes.
But we're free to engage with it. Yeah, yes. From your perspective as the executive, yes.
Okay, I had some slides, if members want that. I thought I'd just...
Yeah, we'll put it up. What's the problem?
Should I, who's got the slides?
Have they sent it to you to print? No.
No.
I'm not sure why you didn't do that.
Just in time.
Fine. Can we have copies of this?
Yes, there's copies. Let's see them.
Don't have them, shouldn't give them.
No, my sister, it's not about you, it's about them. They can't just come here and expect you to go and print.
No.
So you're not their dog's buddy. They will have to deliver.
It is, yeah. I don't know where Cindy's walked out.
Fine, go ahead.
Okay, Chair. So let me just very quickly just go through. If you can just go through, I'll go through this very quickly. Who's the jockey pressing button? Johnson. Okay, if you don't mind. Right, Chair. Look, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just to make the point that, you know, in the State of Nation address, the President talked about taking steps to stabilize and strengthen vital institutions like SARS. This was in February this year, and he certainly understood the point on tax, the importance of tax morality, and he talked about appointing the Commission of Inquiry. Next slide. Minister Kigaba, in his budget speech, also made reference to this announcement, and in fact made several announcements which I've just put up for members to have a look at, including the fact that there were 2 years of shortfalls in revenue. Go on. So I've also given a summary of actual documents that are out there, so that there's no speculation. The presidency then, when Mr. Moyani was suspended on the 19th, had put out a press statement. I've just quoted, so members can have a look what the issues that he raised. He raised the Makwakwa issue. He raised the issue of the handling, particularly of the FIC report, and he raised the issue of VAT refunds, according to the media statement. I think the President also just indicated the importance of SARS, why it needs to be sorted out as quickly as possible, because it does pose a risk to the fiscal framework, and at that time to our credit rating as well. And in terms of the law, it's the Minister of Finance, and Chair, this is an important point to note, that the Commissioner is appointed by the President, and therefore, according to the law, or the lawyer's interpretation, can only be dismissed by the President. But this is the complex relationship. The executive authority is the Minister of Finance, and of course the employer is SARS. Okay, so you've got 3 different parties, and you need to be a genius to figure out what applies when. So that's why Mark Kingdon was appointed by the Minister of Finance. Go on. Of course, it did happen that day there was an acting Minister of Finance, but it's the Minister of Finance who had that capacity. Minister Nene also yesterday in his budget vote, I think, just reinforced that any tax revenue collection agency must, to quote him, like Caesar's wife, be above suspicion. The next major step, therefore, towards strengthening public finance is to restore public confidence in SARS. So I'm just trying to give a sense that certainly for the executive, this is a critical issue to resolve as soon as possible. Move on. Chair, and just so that members and everyone's aware, there are about 3 or 4 processes in place currently. So firstly, the Commission of Inquiry. I understand that, remember, we'll focus on past issues. I know that we are expecting it to be gazetted this week, the terms of reference and the appointment of the Commission. It's on the point of being gazetted. But I certainly don't want to steal the thunder of my ultimate boss, the President. He will undoubtedly make the announcement. But just to point out that the Commission of Inquiry is actually Yunus Karim is my boss.
No. Let me,
sorry, I'm sorry,
now.
Chair.
I'm gone
sorry.
tomorrow.
Yes.
The committee is.
But just to point out, the Commission of Inquiry is expected obviously to be backward-looking, in that it will be looking at transgressions that took place in terms of the SARS Act, the various tax administration acts. It may make recommendations for the future arising out of what happened in the past, but it essentially is sort of looking into the past with a view to fixing up for the future. And it will be able to look at issues like VAT refunds and so on. And this is important. You need a Commission of Inquiry to go into into matters of particular taxpayers. Nobody else can do that. Not the Minister, not the President. Only Mark Kingdon here can do it in his capacity as acting Commissioner. None of us can do it. The Davis Tax Committee is a forward-looking committee which focuses on policy issues, not on transgressions and so on. Of course, sometimes policy includes administration, and I do want to bring just to your attention, and not that I agree with all of his report, but that last year, September or in November, he published the tax administration, the report on tax administration for the Minister of Finance. So that's out there in the public domain. And we are preparing even a departmental response, because we agree on some of the recommendations, we don't agree on others, but I think it would be worth the committee looking into these issues. And of course, under the auspices of the DTC, you have the independent panel on VAT, which is chaired by Prof. Ingrid Woolard, which you know well about. Thirdly, and a separate process, and this gets to the issue that Mark has touched on, and apologies, Chair, I really thought we were starting at 10 today, that's why I thought I was 10 minutes early, but it ended up being late. There's a disciplinary inquiry into the SARS Commissioner. Again, I'm just taking what's been put out by the Presidency in the public domain, that the President yesterday announced the appointment of a new presiding officer, Mr. Azar Bam, Senior Counsel, after withdrawing the appointment of Judge O'Regan. I should add, after objections from Mr. Tomoyani's lawyers, I should add the Presidency pointed out that at all stages, ex-Judge O'Regan made it clear that she serves on the board of Corruption Watch, that though the Presidency didn't think that this was an issue, and I would guess, just to put my own 1 cent's worth, that, you know, it's a body that's against corruption. You would think there wouldn't be objections, but okay, there were. But that what you then had was just to move this process, because it needs to move faster, obviously, on legal advice, the changes were made to the chair. So that's a separate process. It deals with the employer-employee relationship. And I want to add that this will not deal with any tax issues. So even the issue of VAT refunds will not be dealt by this committee, this disciplinary process. That will be dealt with through the Commission of Inquiry, okay? Obviously, you know who the current commissioner is, and then the NT itself has a role. So those are the players and the processes that I think this needs to be kept in mind. Move on. Chair, again, this is the only instance where I do choose the media statement on what the charges are, that they do relate to the Makwakwa matter, they do relate to unauthorized bonus payments, misleading Parliament, and there's a various parliamentary questions and so on that obviously the Commission had to respond on, and with regard to KPMG instructing a SARS official not to cooperate. This is out in the public domain. I don't have the source document, or that's not been made public the way I understand it. On the Commission of Inquiry, the way we understand it in the Treasury, that it will deal with the adequacy and legality of steps that SARS took to address revenue shortfalls. So hence the VAT refunds and so on will come in. And it will also look at adherence to tax administrative processes, including customs and excise. And I should add, Chair, that we hope as Treasury, because a lot of this acts of omission often would also assist or not stop illicit financial flows, that more could be done, and issues of tax evasion of highly connected individuals, like you've heard on the tobacco story. So in our understanding, these will all be covered, including all what Hogan Lovells, PwC, KPMG, all of them will have to talk under oath there. So whatever they say today, it will also be under oath. I would hope the Commission of Inquiry will look at that. Move on. So I think, Chair, just to express some of our concerns, as I said, and you've made me say this, so I won't repeat this, that no ministers have been given by the Commissioner of SARS up to the point of March 19th, the report on Hogan Lovells. Indeed, it was deliberately kept away. And that's why, if you just look at it, Minister Gigaba, I think, announced that he wanted a Commission of Inquiry into SARS, I think it was around November last year, and that was given effect by President Ramaphosa. Move on. So, Chair, I think in terms of information, and just to help members, we've just processed, read this, and just to bring to your attention certain highlights of these reports. Move on. Okay. Firstly, I think the first point of reference is what was the FIC request. Now, yes, there's been an issue of whether this can be made public, or not public, but frankly it's out in the public domain. And if you look at what's out in the public domain, it related to 4 specific requests that the FIC made related to the proceeds of crime, tax evasion, breach of internal protocols, and money laundering. This was given effect to, move on, to terms of reference. Indeed, in the correspondence between Minister Gordon and Hogan and the Commissioner, he asked, is SARS not telling Hogan Lovells what the terms of reference is? Or is Hogan Lovells telling you what the terms of reference is? Really unusual. Okay? So I would like to know, when the Commission finds out, what actually happened and who said what and when. Okay? And so this was what was there, and at some point it got amended. Again, the Minister was literally kept in the dark. Hogan Lovells didn't come and tell the Minister, okay, because of client confidentiality. So they say. Move on. Again, it was also very unclear who was investigating what. Even if you look at Hogan Lovells, they were saying they weren't investigating the money laundering. That was being done by the Hawks, I think, or the police. But yet, if you now read these documents, you'll see that they commission the sources of those cash payments into Mr. Makwakwa's account. Now, if that's not money laundering, I don't know what. But it would be interesting to know that for 1 year, you had parliamentary questions which clearly said what the terms of reference were. About a year later, Hogan Lovells comes and says, no, they're not investigating that. And in a sense, this pretense was kept right up to the point that we got those documents, which I agree, Chair, was a tremendous achievement. It really required a lot to get that report, which showed that they had commissioned a report with PwC. And if you look at the report, one is on the sources of finance, and it appears to be a desktop study because most of the requests to Makwakwa were done through Hogan Lovells, and that there was also a tax investigation, which of course that report I haven't seen and we haven't seen, and that's what the acting commissioner presumably would be able to see and not tell us. Okay, so okay, so there was a lot of to and fro on what was actually in the report, and if you then go into the report, you see, the PwC report. It's actually quite astounding. Okay, it's really astounding, even with this desktop study, that you have many of the sources of funding. It's clear from the report that Mr. Makwakwa could not refuse to provide information to confirm. He had an initial response as a Baker McKenzie report, which was his lawyers, which was his first response, and then there were 2 other responses later. And in all of those, what you see, Chair, is that it's only 1,000 or 2, a tiny amount which he could confirm. But the most staggering thing, Chair, is that SARS, according to this report, was requested for information. So they didn't even want to confirm the payments that SARS made to Mr. Makwakwa. Okay, not as his tax payments. If he went on a trip overseas and got a whatever stipend or whatever, even that was not given. SARS was asked about the phone and imaging the phone and the computers of both Mr. Makwakwa and Alski. And even that was refused. Okay. Of course, this investigation went nowhere. And it does appear that the most trivial of charges were put forward. Yes, if you look at the PwC findings, go on to that. So I won't go into all of this. You know, they said they couldn't investigate the foreign currency issue, which clearly was a transgression of exchange control laws. And they didn't have the mandate. And it doesn't appear...
And just coming out of Parliament of South Africa, as SARS is briefing the finance on the standing committee, as well as some of the other issues faced inside the SARS. We'll be taking a short break here on SABC Newsroom. Do stay tuned. When we come back, we have that femicide panel that we have been talking about this morning in light of the recent gender-based violence that have been making headlines in South Africa. This and more when we come back.
The only way to pour the perfect beer, this professional barman would tell you, is into a glass tilted at exactly 45 degrees. Oh, bless you. Bless you, sir. Bless you again. Well, we'd say the perfect way to pour a beer is at this angle, straight into your mouth. Tops its bar. Good beer, good advice, no Ponzi beer stuff.
Welcome back to SABC News. You're watching Newsroom. Well, it was hardly 24 hours after the conviction of Karabo Mokwene's murderer when we learned of yet another young woman who died allegedly at the hands of her former partner. Zolile Kumalo, a first-year quantity surveying student at the Mangosuthu University of Technology, who was allegedly shot dead by an MUT ex-student and former boyfriend at the student residence in Durban. The reports say that 21-year-old Kumalo tried to break up with her ex-boyfriend who couldn't take it. While questions about how this is being managed to get past the security at the residence with a firearm, the real issue is what made him think he had the right to take another person's life because he had been rejected. Well, recently, South Africa has also learned of alleged abuse claims in musician Babes Wodumo and her record label owner Mampintsha's relationship. Now to discuss this further, we are joined in studio by Nonhlanhla Sibanda Moya, gender specialist, the Center for Study of Violence and Reconciliation, as well as Matthew Mensah, spokesperson from the Karabo Mokwena Foundation and human rights activist against gender violence. We will also be joined possibly by another participant. For now, though, very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, let's just have a look, before we get into what's been making headlines recently, let's have a look at the statistics. Between April and December of 2016, already police recorded a total of over 14,000 murders. Of these, just under 2,000 were women. Let's have a look at the stats of that.
I think the statistics speak to what our studies said last year, that we really are a country in crisis when it comes to violence against women. This is a study that we did last year. If you look at the fact that at least 3 women are killed by their intimate partner every day, I mean, that really speaks of the gravity of the crisis that we have around violence against women. But I think what is common, or the commonality amongst the cases that we're speaking about today, and something that we need to be on the lookout for, is the fact that these are killings and murders that are perpetrated by young people. And these are murders, for the 2 cases, that are perpetrated by young people in tertiary institutions. And we probably need to be looking at ways, we need to be looking at what this means. What is this face of violence against women that we are now seeing increasingly in institutions of higher learning? And in terms of our strategies, what is it that we need to be doing to deal with it within the context of institutions of higher learning?
Just briefly, let's just have a look at these stats of women actually reporting abuse claims.
So the last study that I am aware of is one that was done by the MRC, where out of all cases that go to court, only one in 9 of those cases end up in a conviction, and that speaks of the lack of some systematic problems within the criminal justice system that need to be looked at. It also speaks to the lack of confidence. It translates to women having lack of confidence in the criminal justice system, because if only 1 in 9 cases result in a conviction, obviously as a woman I'm going to think twice before I actually approach the criminal justice system.
Now, Matthew, you are involved as spokesperson also from the Karabo Mokwena Foundation. Just take us through how many young women actually do come forward and do come to the foundation seeking for help.
I mean, it's an alarming amount of young women that's coming forward. And I think as well, but I would say that I think the big issue as well is that you have a lot of women that, first of all, it's about getting the courage to first of all go and report it. But a lot of times, during that process, they don't get the necessary support from the people that's nearest to them often. And that's why they sometimes go back and then withdraw afterwards, which makes it even, of course, impossible to get to the bottom of these cases. But I would definitely agree with you. It's a big issue that we have so many women that is trying to take this forward to court, and they don't get the necessary support, which is us in the society that have to be able to help more and support these women that actually, first of all, try to take that courage and go forward. You know, the system cannot support or help if we don't back up the things that's put forward.
In terms of abuse, let's have a look at, one of the issues that other people had brought up on commentary on social media was that people always seem to say, specifically in relationships, that there's always some sort of a sign. There's always some sort of signs of abuse. In the situation or the case between Karamokwena as well as Sandile, to your knowledge, were there signs of abuse that were alarming that could have been highlighted before?
Well, I definitely think that there was signs. I mean, this is something that only came up like afterwards. I mean, for me to know about it. But yes, there was like no signs. But the thing is that a lot of times, and this is the sad thing, that so many women, and especially like young girls, find themselves in relationships where somebody would do something, and then afterwards be crying and apologizing, or it will never happen again. And then this is the common excuse that, but he loves me and he will never do it again, until it happens again and again, and suddenly it's just something that is normal in that relationship, and then you end up most of the times being killed.
Let's then have a look at the socio-physiological signs of a perpetrator or someone who's conducting abuse, and the rationale and the reasoning that the abuser seems to have.
I think for me, a point that we need to be looking at is that femicide is the final consequence to domestic violence. So in a lot of those cases, and in the ones that, and particularly the one of Karabo Mokoena, we've seen how there was a whole history of domestic violence in the case, and her being killed was the final consequence to it. And we've seen this, and it would not even be surprising in the other two cases we're talking about, that there also has been a history of domestic violence, and hence I think our efforts, while the judiciary is doing much, and they are, I mean, they're doing what they need to be doing to a certain extent, but I think that we need to be looking at how we prevent it from happening in the first place before it gets to the final consequence of somebody being killed. And in doing that, I think it's also very important that we center the experiences and the voices of young women in coming up with these strategies. Presently, social media is playing such a big role. So there's a lot of social media activism around violence against women, and we need to be tapping into those resources, because it is what young people, it is mediums that young people are using. So if we want to speak a message to young people, both the perpetrators and to women, young women in general, we need to be using the very platforms that they use.
You made a very important highlight in your explanation there, saying that women need to come out, they need to have some sort of a voice. In particular, if we have a look at the social media saga that played out just last week, including Babes Wadumo, of course, the abuse allegations then being flighted live on a radio station, and a lot of the commentary on social media somewhat attacked the presenter, saying it was not the right platform for the presenter to bring such allegations. Babes would be a victim, possibly her security could be put into question. How do we then tackle femicide in the case of Karabo Mokoena, who didn't have someone to come up and speak about it and say that this is what's happening, I know what's happening, and then that was then the radio presenter in question's argument, saying, I know about this and I don't want it to go further, hence I'm bringing it up. How do we start to tackle it?
But I mean, with this particular case, of course, for us that works regarding women abuse, we always want to get as much awareness about it, because that's what helps, the whole mindset, which is getting that into, especially boy child, that to understand in a very early age about gender-based violence. But I do believe that in this particular case, I think it would have been better served to have let babes know beforehand, because it seems it's almost like a little bit of a ambush in lack of a better word. And I don't think that is necessarily the way that you need to go, because also women should also have opportunity to know when they are putting themselves into such a platform, And I think that it would have been maybe better served if she had told her, this is what we're going to be talking about. Do you have an issue with it or something? Instead of just you finding yourself in the middle of live on air and getting to deal with such a subject,
Your view on that?
I think that for me, what we need to be focusing on is ensuring that we have effective support mechanisms for women who do speak out. In our study, women were saying to us, so you're saying that we need to speak out, but do you ever think about what the cost of speaking out is? Because there are no support mechanisms. We cannot trust the police. We cannot trust the criminal justice system, yet you continually in your campaigns urge us to speak out. And to me, what that says is that we lack the necessary support systems to support women who actually do speak out. Do we believe women when they come to us and they tell us that they have been abused as a friend, whether it's in your capacity as a friend, as a religious leader, as a university lecturer, in whatever capacity, do we believe them? Do we support them through the process of dealing with that abuse or that violence, or when they share that experience? And I think that's what we need to be looking at. And in doing that, I will echo once again that we need to work together with women, with young women, to get their voices and experiences, and in crafting what those support mechanisms should look like.
In terms of what you said, in bringing the boy child into this, let's discuss then mechanisms at a younger age, at a grassroots level, to teach boys, of course, to be gender sensitive, and at the same time that women and men are equal.
Well, first of all, I want just to quickly comment on. I don't believe. I don't agree with the message of that we cannot trust the police. I think we can trust the police. In every department, there's always be someone that's not doing the job well enough, and they should be rooted out. But in principle, I think that I've been involved with a few cases where it's been solved due to the police. And for example, the captain that came with all the evidence on the Krabbe case, which made it get to the eviction that we had. So I do believe that the police is doing a really good job, but we also have to be able to support the police with coming forward when we know some things that's happening, and support those people who go and report it. But to get back to your question regarding the boy child, I think that it's very important that we start in a very early age, and even introduce. I know that right now there's some board games that's being invented that can go out to the education institutions, for younger children, where they can learn about how to behave and interact between each other, regarding the issues of what to do and how not to treat a woman.
Let's also talk about behavior. I mean, a lot of women, from a cultural aspect, from a household aspect, you see how men treat our mothers, our aunts, our grandmothers, and what they've accepted. And you grow up in that sort of a household, and you somewhat think that it's normal. If something happens to you and your husband gets upset, or your brother's upset, that he can't put your hands up on you because he was upset. Let's have a look at those issues in trying to eradicate that at home already.
So an interesting dynamic that came out of our study is where women were saying to us, so part of the reason why we stay in these relationships has to do with the whole idea of marriage as the notion of marriage as a space of social standing, so good social standing. So if I divorce, if I leave my husband, what then happens what happens to me, and what does it mean from a cultural and a social perspective? I lose my social position in society, and that has to do with how we are all socialized, both as men, women, and how as we grow up as boys and girls, we are socialized into specific ways of thinking around what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And in terms of what we need to do, I think it has to do with how we parent. So and by parenting, I'm not just reducing it to parenting at home, but parenting as part of a whole village, as part of a whole system, how you're parented within the school system, within the home institution, within the religious institution, so within society. So the ways in which we are raised by reinforcing positive gender roles and positive gender dynamics.
In terms of enforcing those gender positive roles and dynamics, Matthew, what sort of, if any, standpoint do you think that men need to be taking going forward and instilling in their households, as well as instilling for their daughters?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think that it's important that those people who are against gender-based violence also stand up and let their voice be heard, because it's very sad when you see that there's so many different activities happening around the country, when you're having from marches and so on, and it's always the majority of those people that's participating is women. And it's not women who's abusing women, it's men, so we men have to also do a better job to be able to pull your friends around you and get them on board on this thing here, because as you were saying before as well, that it's really about the behavior of us men, like starting from back home, what small kids sees, what you're doing to your wife and so on. That's what they grew up with, and that's what they take as a norm, and they don't really see it's difficult. I mean, last year, the Ministry of Higher Education started to roll out this campaign on gender-based violence with the Deputy Minister, Mpumalanga, which they're actually starting now. I'm actually in that team that is been privileged to be involved with that campaign about to roll out. And as we are sitting and doing all this discussion, that's when that murder happened at MUT, which has just highlighted the issue that's going on in universities, because there are so many young women that goes to school and their parents have sacrificed so much for the children to go to university, and then they're dealing with issues that some of them doesn't even speak about because of their being threatened or so on.
Just as we wrap up, on a closing note, from a law aspect, we see in some other countries, gender-based violence seems to be taken more seriously in other countries and the charges than in South Africa. Recently, there was a case with an MP who was also involved in a domestic violence attack, and the victim tried to withdraw the case. And the NPA came forward saying, no, we're not allowing for this case to be drawn. Do you think then that harsher measures of law should also be, put in place specifically around gender-based violence, just very, very quickly?
I definitely believe that there should be much harder punishments towards gender-based violence, and also otherwise people don't understand how serious it is. So I believe so, yeah.
Great. Your view on that?
So I also do agree that the legal system does have a role, but we also need to be clear that the law only comes in after the violence has happened.
True.
And we need to be putting a whole lot more focus around preventing violence from happening in the first place.
Definitely. We thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Very
you.
Interesting discussion panel in conversation with Nonhlanhla Sibanda Moyo, a gender specialist from the Center for Study of Violence and Reconciliation, as well as Matthew Mensah, spokesperson from the Karabo Mokoena Foundation, as well as a gender-based violence activist. We thank you very much for your time this morning. Let's have a look now at some other news. For the Department of Health in Mpumalanga is optimistic that it will eliminate malaria by the year 2020. Well, this despite the province recording a high number of malaria cases since April last year. Mpumalanga recorded over 9,000 cases and 14 deaths. The province commemorated World Malaria Day in the Komazi area near Mozambique's border.
Commemorating World Malaria Day under the theme Ready to Beat Malaria. The aim is to raise awareness on malaria prevention and control. The Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces recorded a high number of cases last year.
When we look back from 2017 April, we have had about 9,360 cases. And if you look at Nkomazi specifically, we're talking about 3,413 cases that we have seen.
The problem that we have
we take time to go and consult, and at some point it becomes late when they detect it. But through this campaign to say, if you feel you have a headache, you have a flu, quickly go and consult before you can think of taking the issue of consulting to traditional healers.
Community members have heeded government's call, taking advantage of government facilities to test for malaria. 28-year-old Mthandeni Mbebe does regular checks because she stays in a high-risk area near the Mozambique border.
Malaria is a killer disease. That's why it is important to always test. Even at clinics, they encourage us to test.
Non-governmental organizations are also reaching out to communities.
We have nurses in the borders or in the border areas, in the farms. They operate on a daily basis. They go there, they test the people. When they test the people, if they pick a positive case, we then investigate the case to where is the source of this parasite.
Fever, night sweats and fatigue are some of the malaria symptoms. People are encouraged to test as soon as there is a show of these symptoms. Mweli Maslela, SABC News, Gamhlushwa in Mpumalanga.
In an effort to promote good relations between South Africa and Nigeria, the Consul General of Nigeria will today meet with Nigerians living in Mpumalanga to encourage them to obey the laws of the country. Well, Godwin Adama says that there is a need to confront the realities on the ground. He says as a country, it is always painful to always get reports that one of its citizens is dead. Adama says it's important to create a conducive environment for locals and foreign nationals to interact. Let's continue now with some African news. Exporters of fresh produce and flowers in Kenya want South African government to remove import duties leveled on its products. Well, they say duties have made Kenyan fresh produce more expensive in the South African market compared to the European Union countries where they sell duty-free. Well, last year, Kenya exported fresh produce worth $1 billion, most of it destined for the EU markets. Kenya will also begin exporting avocados to South Africa at the end of the year. Well, this comes after South Africa lifted a 10-year ban on avocado exports from the East African nation after the produce was found to be infested by fruit flies.
South Africans have duty on Kenyan products as well, so we're not going to allow that to happen. Number three, South Africa unilaterally put a ban on Kenyan avocados 10 years ago that we've taken to fight. And we've just had the South African inspectors here, and they have now approved exports of avocados from the end of this year. It's still not there yet, but we're almost there.
Well, indeed, let's cross back live to Parliament. Currently, SARS is briefing Parliament with regards to finance. We will be giving you more updates as soon as that live feed is ready. Back to some African news now. Armed groups in South Sudan have released 210 children in Jonglei State's Pibor area as part of efforts by UN agencies and other partners to get warring parties to stop recruiting child soldiers. But ensuring the former child soldiers have access to education and jobs to deter recruitment remains a challenge.
728 South Sudanese child soldiers have been released from the armed forces so far, but reintegrating them into their communities remains a task. Many were recruited by force, while others say they had no choice but to head into the bush to fight because their parents were killed and they had no other way to survive. They exchanged their guns and military fatigues in favor of a starter kit, which includes books, pens, clothes, bed sheets, a mosquito net, and other essential items. Most of the children are from the ranks of the Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition. Ensuring the children get an access to education and jobs to deter recruitment remains a challenge.
It does not make sense for someone to say that they are defending the rights of the children and that's why they are fighting, or they are defending the future of the children and that's why they are fighting. They are defending the future of the country and that's why they are fighting. But you cannot defend the future if you are destroying the future, because children are the future. So let us work together, shoulder to shoulder, and ensure that we make our words into actions.
South Sudan has been mired in conflict since 2013 when troops loyal to President Salva Kiir clashed with troops loyal to then Vice President Riek Machar.
Indeed, going back to that parliamentary committee that is taking place this morning, of course, SARS is addressing the committee this morning on some of the issues we cross live.
So I think we do not need to take a single proposal into account from Treasury. We've heard them, he's right. But we must decide as a committee the sort of things that Thandi is raising. If we are asking Floyd, you think about it, if we are asking Urba to have more powers to deal with errant auditors, what about possible allegations against Hogan Lovells or any other legal firm who hides behind confidentiality? That's a point Thandi has made repeatedly. You yourself, Floyd, let me remind you, agreed with the ANC that we must mandate the advocate Jenkins to look into a situation where either the ombudsperson, as Peace Mabe suggested, or, as we suggested, this committee. You agreed with this, Floyd. You agreed. You said we should have a closed meeting where if there are allegations against people that are not paying their tax, without it being used to smear people, we should have a closed meeting where we look at it, we allow that person or company to be there, Floyd, and their lawyer, and we look at it, and the documents be taken away. Then Peace Mabe came with the proposal, ombudsperson should do it. Now, given our overwhelming load, you cannot expect Frank Jenkins. He gave us a brief report, which you have in your email system. That issue is a policy of this committee, which at the end of this term, Floyd, we're going to write an exit plan, exit report, and say these things must be addressed by the new committee. So you're making a very useful proposal. It hadn't occurred to us as the ANC or me as an individual chair. I think we should look at that. On the matter of attacking that guy's integrity, Floyd, you must have tea with him. It's not right, really. You keep doing that.
Chairperson.
But you're right to say we shouldn't agree with the report.
Chairperson, we're not making, don't suppress what we as members have to raise. We're not making any allegations against him. We've written a letter to the President, to the Minister of Finance, and to the DG about him, and they have not responded.
What about him?
About his conduct with regards to the issue of the Financial Services Conduct Authority and distortion of the regulations in terms of the financial services. And it's not allegations, it's just issues that if they have not proven to be wrong, they remain to be truthful, that is involved in wrongdoing. So don't suppress us. We've got a right. That is why we're not gossiping. We're raising it in front of him so that if he's got to clarify, he can clarify. That is why even the acting commissioner, we can't gossip about him. We raise it in front of him that you have metric, you have a qualification, and he clarifies. It's basic open engagement, which I think you might need to get used to.
Oh, no.
Now,
listen from you, Floyd. No, please. No. Floyd, that is totally irrelevant. But I'm to the issue at hand. You are saying that he has got a vested interest in presenting a report on Hogan Lovells. What is the relevance of that to claims about his behavior on the FSRA Act, which he must have a right of reply to in the public domain, and I'm going to give you the chance. You have a right of reply. You've been accused of nepotism and also maybe racism as well, right? I think you should have a right of reply in writing at the next meeting. Right. What is not? It's not relevant what he's saying. Now, can we move on the issue?
Chair, I don't want us to be distracted from the main issues that we're discussing.
But then people have a right of reply to accusations about the integrity.
Yes, Chair, let the matters be raised separately, please.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Today we're here.
I'm ruling, Thandi. I'm now ruling that actually you have a right of reply, as any official has, to any attacks on your integrity. A letter is in the public domain about your behavior. We don't know. We urge you to ensure that your Minister and DG replies to that letter. Can we minute this? We want you to reply to Floyd. He's got a right of reply. He's a member of Parliament within 7 days. Right of reply. There's no discussion. It's not a policy issue. Secondly, you also have a right of reply in the public domain. So at an appropriate time, when Floyd is here, we can even do it. Right, got reply. You have a right of reply. But not now at the end of the meeting. No. I've ruled. Okay. I've ruled. Right? Now, can we go on? Right. Now, what was the other issue? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I quickly sum up these issues that I'm raising?
Yeah, no, please do.
So you're right that the committee demanded the report of Hogan Lovells.
Yes.
Right? And that was prior to the disciplinary hearing against the recently suspended commissioner of SARS.
Yes.
Right? He has been charged now. He's going to undergo a quasi-judicial process.
Yes.
If it's actually as a judge who's presiding over that, it's almost a judicial process because those judges have to act within the confines of the law. And the National Treasury comes to make emotive input on issues that directly relate to the disciplinary hearing itself, even mentions it and all sorts of things, and even try to agitate Parliament in terms of now, you must remember that Parliament or the National Treasury acts on behalf of the President, who is the one who has instituted the whole inquiry. Aren't you implicating us in things that won't be able to explain? Aren't you just exposing us to litigation in the future in terms of issues that otherwise could have been handled separately? And if we want a report of a disciplinary process, we will demand it once it has been concluded. I honestly don't see, and I honestly do not see this attempt to agitate us and giving imaginary international regulatory mechanisms, which is called Peter Hain. I don't know what kind of
cover the ground flood
in terms of all those issues. That is the first issue. The second issue that we're raising is the issue of we either include the phenomena of tax avoidance in the whole inquiry, or we write to whoever has got the powers to constitute a commission to say, let us specifically look into tax avoidance. That is where we're going to have material benefits.
That's a useful
thing. Because you'll be able to point in the National Revenue Tally that there is money which has been recovered.
Useful thing. We'll come back to that. Thank you. Right. But on the issue now of the process, I have to now deal with the process matters, and you tell me by a vote whether you agree or you don't agree. That's the issue now. Basically,
sorry, can I interrupt? I'm so sorry to do this because I think the process.
You raise the process issue. I'm trying to deal with it.
Yes, and I just before you
deal with the process.
Yes.
Okay, that's
some clarity. My apologies, Mr. Chairman, but
no, on process it's fine.
Maybe like you, my memory is fading.
No, my mind is very clear about that.
Okay, well, fortunately,
mine was always fading.
Okay, I will get Alan, we can put it in writing.
That's fortunate for you because then you'll be able to clarify.
Because I deal with the issues all the time.
The question of the redacted version.
Yeah.
I just don't remember getting a copy, and so
well, the one you should have now, yesterday, is the redacted version, or they given you the original version by accident.
It seems to be a full version, Mr. Chairman.
No, you see, I didn't look at the version yesterday. Then the committee has made a mistake.
Mr. Chairman, you got to understand my
No. What should have been released today is obviously the redacted version. Frank, can you help us? You and Alan handle the redacted version.
Before Frank, Chair, this is what I've been trying to bring to attention.
Oh, it's not what you have is not a redacted version.
No, it's a full version, and the letter is attached to justify it. So we're playing in dangerous waters here.
Okay, fine. In that case, can I get an opinion from Frank? What's happened here? The process, who photocopied this? Was it you? Sorry?
There were two versions. You remember we gave them initially the redacted one, and then yesterday
no, it's the other way around. All right, look, there's a misunderstanding within the committee, from what I can gather. Is Advocate Tao here? I asked him to come. Nobody deliberately did this. What should have happened, I did not look at the version yesterday. I looked at the, So actually what has happened, Advocate Tao, can you sort this matter out again? Nobody's to blame. Can I stress that? It's an innocent, not malicious, it's an innocent mistake. What has happened is, what was printed, unfortunately, is the unredacted version. Am I right, Frank? Instead of the redacted version. I spoke to Alan on Monday morning. My exchange was with Alan. Wickham was not here. He's on leave today. I hope Advocate Tao is listening. I asked him to distribute the report, obviously referring to this, because he's been managing this. So what has obviously happened, Thandi, is the wrong one is issued. So what we're going to do now is ask the media, if they have a copy of this, to return it, but otherwise they're entitled to the redacted version, and you will get a copy after 1 o'clock. So the media's got no copy, right? This is an unintentional mistake. Nobody's done anything wrong. There's no punitive action here, Advocate Tao. It's an innocent thing. People are overworked, and there's staff problems in terms of 1 or 2 people absent. Thandi,
The media will not have copies because this was distributed to us yesterday in our meeting.
All right. So
in that
case, can we agree, Frank? Are we right to say, that the redacted version is available to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So anybody who wants a copy, Teboho is here at 1 o'clock. You can get a copy. Okay. Thank you. Right. Over then to on the matter of the process. Can we also raise this thing that Floyd's right. We raised this at the outset when we discussed it yesterday about the process issues. And I think that what we should seek to do now, Frank, is for you to give us some guidance. Frank?
I'm listening, sir.
Yeah, to give us some guidance. I don't see a problem. See, Hogan's Lovells is here. Now, they have a right of reply. As I understand the inquiry into Mr. Moyane, that inquiry is not into Hogan's Lovells. Is that correct? That, Mr. Momaniat, that inquiry is not into Hogan's Lovells. It has to do with the management by SARS of the Hogan's Lovells report and the Makwakwa. Is that correct? No, the actual disciplinary inquiry. See, Floyd's right. We cannot discuss things here that will prejudice the right of the commissioner to a fair hearing. Yeah. So as I understand it, the disciplinary inquiry is not inquiring into Hogan's Lovells. Right. So the only issue that remains then is, can we not take into account the statements that Momaniat has made about what he thinks should happen to SARS? But he speaks for the executive, the department, the National Treasury, and he has a right to say that. But we are Parliament, we don't have to listen to a word he's saying. Floyd is right. Often we change the bills that they come with and policy. That's not a problem. All we ask now, it's about fair play. What I'm suggesting, if the meeting now agrees, and this you can vote, there's no ruling, yeah? I don't have any more powers, but in some things it's clear. The chairperson has to rule. Now, hear what I'm saying, colleagues. Can we say, Frank, you just guide us a bit, on Hogan's Lovells, the report of Hogan's Lovells, I think, firstly, people can ask questions about the Hogan's Lovells report, not about SARS management of it, a few questions, because we read it and we asked for it. Two, is Hogan's Lovells should be given a chance to reply in 5 or 10 minutes about what happened. The third question that arises, colleagues, is should we not suggest, as we have, as an individual I have done so, and I've conferred with some of the committee members from the ANC, shouldn't we say something to this effect that this matter needs to be addressed not by this committee, where Hogan's Lovells is given a right of reply in some structure and they can deal with it there. We are not the Justice Committee, and even the Justice Committee, so that we can think about where we take it after we hear Hogan's Lovells. But for now, I think we should give them a chance. If people must have a chance of a right of reply, it's not fair. Okay, not just help here. On process, Nati, help.
No, thank you very much. Just on process, not necessarily about Hogan Lovells' right of reply and so on. I think that can be dealt with. If we agree with what Honorable Shivambu has alluded to, it then raises the question, how do we deal with such matters in the future? Is it correct, for an example, that on matters that are being either investigated and processes are unfolding, legal processes there?
Just giving you updates coming out of Parliament, as the Standing Committee on Finance chairperson has also been calling for SARS's disciplinary processes to be expedited. We've been giving you some details as to the current issues within SARS this morning, live from Parliament. Let's have a look now at your headlines this morning. The SARS is currently facing tough questions as they brief Parliament on challenges facing the organisation. South Africa's municipalities to find out how they've performed as the Auditor General is currently releasing their financial results. We'll cross their live in just a moment. Feasibility of moving Parliament from Cape Town to Pretoria is expected to feature in the Presidency's budget vote debate. Indeed, at the top of this hour, Auditor General Kimi Makwetu is currently releasing the latest audit results of the country's municipalities. We cross live.
Business day, trying to articulate in most simple terms what it means to have the kind of audit outcomes that we had in 2011, 2012. We thought that it will make for some very interesting reading when people look at this with the 2018 spectacles now and start navigating through the issues that are raised by this opinion maker after he read, a week after the audit outcomes in 2011, 2012 were released. So we thought, let's go back down memory lane so that we can begin to see that what we are saying in that statement, where we say there's been no positive significant change, is a reality that is not something that we are painting here, but was planted way back then. We go on to say that although there are municipalities in some provinces that are diligently working hard to attain and maintain the desirable audit outcomes through an entrenched culture of accountability and decisive leadership, these outcomes and efforts are overshadowed by the many elements of regression in the local government audit outcomes. I would like to refer you to page 13 as an example in respect of that statement, as well as page 26. Those two pages give us a sense in the map of South Africa as you see it on page 13 as to the provinces that have achieved clean audits, at least as we speak now, in 2016, 2017, and those being municipalities that we signed off as unqualified with no significant findings, either in compliance with legislation or in reporting accurately and clearly on the outcomes of their performance. You'll see the green annotation in respect of each of these provinces reflects the number of municipalities in that province. So each flag is a province. So what's on page 13 is a depiction of those that have achieved clean audits by province. And if you cast your mind straight to page 26, you will see the split in respect of the different types of audit outcomes down to each province. And that's what we are referring to in that paragraph when we say that some of the municipalities that have held strong in respect of managing their finances diligently have, however, been disappointed by a number of reversals that have resulted from their management of the finances in the last year. While we are on page 26, just to look at the legend on the right-hand side of this report, what it tells us in each of these provinces is the number of municipalities that have either achieved an audit outcome that is unqualified with no findings, being the green ones, while the ones that are yellow are the ones that are unqualified but have not passed the test with regards to compliance with legislation, as well as reporting accurately on their performance. Again, the legend indicates also at the bottom that the ones that are purple are the ones where the audit office has found a number of areas where they were not doing what was expected of them in respect of accounting. Hence, we qualified them in respect of their financial statements, which also comes with non-compliance in certain areas with legislation, as well as accurate reporting on their performance. You'll also see as we go through the presentation, the red ones are starting to shrink, which, in accordance with the statistics that we've provided, is also in line with the targets that were set in the medium-term strategic framework. Overall, if you look at the summary of the audit outcomes, just at the top of page 26, where we compare 2015 to 2016 versus 2016 and 2017, right at the top left corner of page 26. You could see the movement where we were last year in respect of almost 241 of the municipalities. These were the outcomes that were achieved in number of municipalities. What we are referring to as a regression, for example, the green ones, which is the clean audits, were 48 in the previous period and have now reduced to 33. And so it goes with the rest of the other audit outcomes as shown on that page. So that page will give you an overall summary of the audit outcomes in respect of each of those municipalities. While we are on page 26, you can see that the advice, according to what's on page 2 of the media statement, the advice that was given by the audit office clearly was not followed in respect of addressing those matters. And we believe that clear attention needs to be given to the issues that are continuing to contribute to the lousy audit outcomes, as it were, that we have come to see in local government in the most recent years. On page 3 of the media release, there we are again looking also at page 26 of the general report. That's where we are reporting about the total of 256 municipalities as well as 21 municipal entities. And the number of municipalities, as we know, with the consolidation of a lot of these across the provinces, decreased from 278 to 257. And that's just the statistics in respect of those municipalities. And I've already said that the key issues that have contributed, if you look at page 27 and page 28 of the general report, was largely the regression in submission of financial statements. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that the production of credible financial statements as a start is the primary responsibility of financial managers and CFOs, because their job is to account for the transactions that are taking place, some of which require certain documentation to be provided in order for them to get a better chance of producing credible financial statements. In this instance, we are noting the fact that there were quite a number of them that were not able to produce these financial statements at first instance as credible set of accounts, in the sense that we had to point to them certain areas of material misstatements and errors that were contained in the initial set of financial statements before any of them could get a chance of getting financial statements that were unqualified. Moving to page 29 again of this report, where we draw attention to the area of compliance with legislation. As we can see, the non-compliance by about 78% of these municipalities, accounting for a total of about 186, can potentially lead to financial loss. And that's what we say on page 29, and we identify the areas that they did not comply with. As you know, in the past we've reported the fact that the management of procurement and contract management has been the significant area of failure when it comes to compliance with prescribed legislation. The area of prevention of unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure has also been another area that has preoccupied the reports of the audit office over the last number of years, as well as the glaring lack of consequences that were often absent when people had done wrong or have done incorrect things as they account for municipal finances. We have often seen that there has been little of consequence in respect of dealing with those people that transgressed laws and regulations in financial management. We break down this report further to indicate that among other areas of non-compliance is a significant area around expenditure management, the disciplines in place that are expected to be observed in order to manage expenditure. That also deals, on page 29, it also deals with creditors that are not being paid within the prescribed number of days, as well as issues of managing the assets of the institution where proper and effective systems of internal control on asset management are not observed. And these assets, we know, when the expenditures are made, are aimed at procurement of assets that are likely or are going to be used for the delivery of services of various kind. Some of these we will speak to in this media release, because we also look at what are these assets that are being produced, how are they being cared for, Are they being maintained? Are they being effectively managed in order to ensure that they produce the goods and services that they were procured for? We've also paid attention, among others, to the area of human resource management in this report, where we look at the levels of vacancies in certain key positions, particularly those of municipal manager, the CFO, as well as the heads of supply chain management. Another big issue, again, which we reflect on in this report is the area of revenue management, where again in 2016-2017 we still see certain municipalities not being able to account for the revenue that they generate adequately. Let us have a look quickly on page 32, where we deal with the area of irregular expenditure. And I'm now on page 4 of this media release, but we are articulating the detail pertaining to that irregular expenditure on page 32. The page that's headed Unauthorized, Irregular, Fruitless and Wasteful Expenditure. You will note in our report that we say irregular expenditure has grown from 16.2 billion in the previous year to 28.3 billion in the current year under review. And I'm going to pause there quickly and ask you to have a look at what page 32 says about this 28.3 billion. This 28.3 billion, if you look at the line that says irregular non-compliance with legislation, it came in total in 2016-2017 as a conglomerate figure of all the 257 municipalities we audit at an amount of 28.37 billion, represented by about 215 municipalities, growing from where it was in 2015-16 at 16.2. Now, the question is, the bulk of this increase, this is the point I'd like to clarify, the bulk of this increase, to the extent of about 15.026 billion, was expenditure in previous years only uncovered and disclosed in 2016-2017. So what it means is that the irregular expenditure in 2016-2017 did not grow by that quantum in that year. The municipalities, because they are required to investigate instances of irregular expenditure. We've often said in our report, this irregular expenditure as reported is likely to be incomplete. So what they've done is then they've gone back to contracts related to expenditures incurred in previous periods and only identified and reported on it as required by the MFMA in the year 2016-2017. Meaning, if you look again in that same block where we say is all of it 2016-2017 expenditure, we are saying at the bottom only about 4.5 billion of expenditure in respect of irregular expenditure is for transactions of 2016-2017. So I think it's important to look at that growth so that we don't say we've now had an additional 12 billion in 1 year. The additional expenditure for irregular expenditure is about 4.5 because some of it is expenditure incurred in previous years only identified and reported on in 2016-2017. What does it mean? It means that the efforts that are being put into the system by municipal managers and CFOs are increasing the level of detection of irregular expenditure. Because in some instances they don't go through the whole exercise in identifying this expenditure, but pick it up in years subsequent to when the money was spent. So that is what accounts for that extent and level of irregular expenditure. And I think if you want to see how we unpack all of this irregular expenditure in detail, as well as some of the instances to which it relates, as well as some of the provinces that were affected by this irregular expenditure, you will see we've basically identified the top 10 contributors to this irregular expenditure, whether or not it was incurred in 2016-2017, but we have taken the full quantum of the amount. You will see on page 34 of the report that the Eastern Cape leads the pack with regards to the total extent of irregular expenditure incurred by municipalities in that province. It accounts for about 13.5 billion of the total, followed by the Northwest, then Gauteng, and so it goes with the rest of the other provinces. And if you look at also the same irregular expenditure, if you look at which municipalities were the main contributors, regardless of which province they came from, is what is set out on page 36. Nelson Mandela Bay Metro has that amount as reflected there of 8.1 billion, followed by OR Tambo District, followed by City of Tshwane, and so it goes for the rest of them over the page, the top 10 contributors to this total of irregular expenditure. So the long and short of it, if one looks at what does this thing mean, what it means is that there are many instances of procurement activity and expenditure management that falls foul of the rules of transparency and competitiveness as far as municipalities perform their activities. Because of the limitations of an audit is not able to get to the bottom of the reasons why that particular expenditure was incurred the way it was. It only comes to light when a specific investigation is initiated to ensure that we can get to the bottom of what is behind it. Is it a mere ignoring of regulations? Is it to do with people not competently executing their jobs? Or is there ill intent behind it? And that is the answer that can only be given after a specific investigation has been conducted towards addressing that irregular expenditure. On page 5 of this release, we look at what we say here on page 39 of the report. We are talking here on page 5 about the failure to investigate findings. And we are analyzing that on page 39 of this report, where we look at what councils have dealt with in respect of the unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. And you can see, in essence, if you look at the top line where councils were dealing with the 15-16 issues of UIFW, which is unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful, that's what that abbreviation is about, there's hardly anything that was recovered. But the bulk of it, the red, is what councils have not yet dealt with by the time we release this report. And cumulatively, if you look at the whole issue of irregular expenditure, cumulatively, taking into account that which was incurred in previous years, it still is a significant amount that has not been dealt with by councils. And the amount that has been addressed to date is just about a fraction, if you think about what 1 million represents in relation to 30 or 43 billion in total. I think also one of the things that we point out to on page 6 of the media release is also drawing attention to an increasingly difficult environment that the auditors are finding in respect of audits that we do. I'm sure the media will remember towards the end of last year we did highlight our frustration in respect of this particular matter. And in the latest period, we've had many staff members citing instances where they were confronted by intimidatory and hostile environments, especially where they were shining the light in certain instances on areas that were not looked at before. So we believe that there is a scope for anybody who has a challenge with what the auditors are reporting. However, we only accept it if there are sufficient grounds for the contestation. In this instance, we just want to highlight the fact that that matter has not gone away. We still are finding our auditors being put under sometimes unnecessary pressure without due consideration to the fact that auditors are supposed to do this work independently. On page 41 of the general report, and looking at page 7, where we speak about the financial health of municipalities, we are saying here the inability to collect debt from municipality consumers was widespread among a number of the municipalities. And I think it's a reflection of the sentiments that we have picked up both in the most recent budget votes as well as of yesterday when the minister spoke to some of the challenges in financial management in local government. And I think it is inevitable that these municipalities, for as long as they are not able to collect the debt owing to them, will find it difficult to balance their books. In total, about 31% of the municipalities disclosed a deficit, meaning that the expenditures that they had incurred, and I'm looking at page 41 now with all the movements that you are referring to here, where we say about 31% of the municipalities disclosed a deficit. These are instances where the revenue that they were able to generate overall suddenly got exceeded by the expenditures that were associated with the revenue that was generated. This puts a strain on their ability to continue to spend on the things that they need to spend on for as long as the revenues they ought to generate slip away from them. We also highlight the fact under the financial health of municipalities that the financial woes of local government also weighed heavily on municipal creditors. The impact of this inability to pay creditors was most evident in the huge sums owed for the provision of electricity and water to ESCOM and the water boards, respectively. I think there was a significant exposure of this matter when ESCOM and the respective people from SALGA, as well as National Treasury, were speaking about this matter in respect of monies owing to water boards and ESCOM. The financial statements that we have signed bear evidence to the significant amounts over periods of time that have not been paid to these primary suppliers, especially that they are at the coalface of the things that most of these municipalities deliver, which is water and electricity. We've set these out clearly in the financial statements, and I think for an appreciation by municipality of how this plays itself out, I would refer you to look at the respective financial statements to scrutinize exactly which municipalities owe which of these utility companies how much over what period of time. Another point that we are highlighting again in these audit outcomes, on page 41, we are drawing attention there at the top right hand to vulnerable financial position of municipalities, where we say about 31% of the municipalities, which represent about 73 of them, disclosed in their financial statements that they may not be able to continue operating. Although they have to continue operating, they were reporting that they were in a particular vulnerable financial position at the end of the financial year. That was June of 2017. Meaning that when they look at their finances and they analyze the financial commitments that they have, as well as those that they are still to make, they find that they are either not going to be able to have the necessary cash resources to continue to pay for the things that they ought to pay for. And that's why we want to draw attention to that issue, to say the list that was produced by Treasury or by COGTA in respect of the vulnerable municipalities is consistent with the same municipalities that we have examined from an audit point of view, which means that the level of vulnerability was not exaggerated. It is consistent with what we have also found, barring the fact that the numbers may not be the same, but we just cross-checked in a number of these provinces, and we found that there is sufficient evidence to suggest that those vulnerable municipalities were also thrown out through the audit. I think it is important also to look at page 41 at the bottom in respect of the provincial overview, just to get an understanding of which among these provinces have got the significant majority of municipalities that are in this vulnerable position. You will see, for example, the Free State. This is now the provincial overview and the overall assessment of vulnerability. If you look at them just at the bottom of page 41 on the left-hand side, Free State leads the pack, followed by the Northwest, followed by the Northern Cape. These are the three provinces that have the majority of municipalities who have demonstrated a significant level of vulnerability. For example, if you just pay attention to the Free State box there, where we say overall assessment of vulnerability in the Free State, where there were good indicators found, there was no municipality in this province that we found to have good indicators of strong financial management and financial health. Neither did we find those that were of concern, meaning that they were either here or there. However, we found all 18 of them requiring intervention in order to stop the bleeding. As far as the Northwest, if you look at the next one, it's about 59% of them. About 13 municipalities in that province are in a specific serious financial difficulty, and followed by the 56% of the Northern Cape. So if you look at all 9 provinces in respect of the number of municipalities, you will find most of them in these 3 provinces. And I think if you cast your mind to the list that would have been drawn up by COGTA, you will find most of the municipalities in those 3 provinces. Let me quickly step down to page 38 and just look at quickly this area of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I think all I need to say insofar as this one is concerned, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it is basically expenditure incurred where real opportunity not to incur it was not taken advantage of. This is where we pay interest unnecessarily, we pay penalties unnecessarily, because we do not assign people to make sure that whatever obligations we have are met and carried out on due dates. As we know, in major contracts, if you don't do it, you then pay something. Now that is expenditure incurred in vain because you've got nothing for it. All you do, you pay because you didn't pay attention to the fact that you must submit a VAT return or you must pay a particular creditor because there are terms. If people bring their equipment on site to come and do a road or water infrastructure, every day they wait for a decision to be made. They normally impose penalties for those kind of things. So that is really what we are looking at, and you can see the numbers are not big, but if this is left unattended, it is potentially about 1.5 billion of expenditure that could have been used for various other activities. Somewhere else on page 42 to page 44 of this general report, we there speak about the shortcomings in the development and maintenance of infrastructure. What we do every year, we pick up different areas of infrastructure management and infrastructure expenditure as managed by the different municipalities and test it in respect of compliance with very many prescripts that come with it. You will know that some of them come via conditional grants as well as other grants that are the likes of your municipal infrastructure grant, public transport network grant, as well as the urban settlement development grant. These are the grants that we have examined through this audit, as well as what has been reported on in this general report. The information pertaining to our assessment of all of these grants, right down to the provision of road infrastructure on page 42, as well as the provision of water and sanitation, and lastly, the maintenance of water infrastructure, as well as the extent of water losses as articulated in page 44 of the release. So there's sufficient information that we have shared here just to give a sense of what our assessment of the findings has been in a number of these areas. Some of them, for example, the findings that we have made, especially if you look on page 42, targets not being achieved in respect of what has been committed, road reported achievements not reliable, as well as supply chain management findings associated with the delivery of infrastructure and its maintenance in a number of these municipalities. As far as the road infrastructure is concerned, we also highlight also through each of the provinces as to which provinces had major findings in respect of this, because once most of these project management disciplines are not in place, that's when we start seeing the escalating levels of fruitless and wasteful expenditure in a number of them. So that will be the detail with regards to each of our assessment of the project area. I'd like to perhaps look at page 10 now of this media release and say that as we are going through this report, alongside we are also dealing with the committee on the Auditor General, and I'm sure the chair will take the floor later, where we had in 2016 agreed with the committee that there's going to be a process initiated in Parliament. And really, I think this particular amendment of the Public Audit Act is largely about addressing consequences, among other things, through an audit legislative instrument. That's effectively what that is about. And we are saying that when we raise the issue of consequences not being there, most people were asking us, so what are you going to do about it? And what I'm reporting now is that the process that will give rise to that capability for the audit office is nearing completion, having been commenced in 2017, and we hope through it will be another instrument that had not been in place that will assist in reinforcing many other initiatives that are taking place either in COGTA or in SALGA or in the National Treasury. But just for interest's sake, we've also highlighted in the yellow block under that paragraph instances that already exist where we are not able to activate this power to refer these for investigation. What could have been had this particular power been in place already? An example, for example, among others, is that in one particular audit where we identified certain issues pertaining to financial reporting as well as the employment of a consultant, there was no service level agreement, there were no regular contract extensions, and excessive rates paid, and a lack of monitoring of the work performed by the consultant. Despite the AG reporting on to the board that this contract was potentially fraudulent, the board did not take any action to investigate the matters raised. Now, the reason you are using this example, you are saying if a particular authorized body does not take the required action to deal with some of the matters that are findings in the audit, this particular power will enable the audit office then to step in and do it themselves so that we can get to the bottom of exactly who and how much and what consequence will attach to that particular situation. Now that's the bulk of the stuff I wanted to share in respect of what is in these audit outcomes, and maybe I will quickly move to page 13 and just draw attention to some highlights of each of the provinces. If you look at what is on page 52 to page 78 of the general report, we are giving an insight and an assessment of our overall conclusions in respect of each of the provinces. And the media release touches in more summary level. However, the general report, starting on page 52 with the Eastern Cape and ending up on page 78 with the Western Cape, is a detailed breakdown down to each province, where we have highlighted a couple of issues in respect of these audit outcomes. We've decided that to make comparisons with these provinces in some of these is quite a difficult exercise, because you have a province that has got a majority of clean audits, while alongside you also have a province that has got unqualified audits with findings in certain areas. And we just thought that it would be good if you look at the statistics as we have set out in the media release, just to assess for yourselves the kind of issues that we are picking up. Just while we are on page 13, if one looks at the Eastern Cape, for example, here in the Eastern Cape, we are giving a summary of opportunities that were lost in respect of the commitments that they had made over a period of time. While they had about 20% of clean audits in 2015, 2016, that has now gone down to the 5% that you see there. The quality of financial statements across this province, if one looks at all of the municipalities here, is about 62%. And as I said earlier on, its irregular expenditure, which was about 5.4 billion in 2015-16, has shot up to an irregular expenditure amount of 13.5. And that is the kind of summary that you will find with respect to the rest of the other 8 provinces as we look at how they have performed and how their own individual municipalities have performed. And lastly, perhaps as we finish this feedback on this general report, I think it is worth noting that at the back of this report, from page 80 onwards, to make it easy for those that are going to write and analyze the report from page 80 to page 88, those 8 pages, we really set out the key issues that are pertinent to understanding the audit outcomes, as well as understanding the different types of audit results that we reach as an audit office. We also give an insight into how the audit process works, what we audit and how we audit it, as well as the scope of the different areas that we focus on in an audit. A detailed explanation of the meaning attached to terms like irregular expenditure, the likes of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, as well as what our understanding based on the legal instruments is of the likes of your conditional grants, how they should be handled, as well as the purpose for which these grants are audited. We've also given you an insight into exactly what we look for in the performance reports that are presented. We are not validating the fact or otherwise of the delivery of services because we are not trained to deal with that. We examine the data and the information that gets reported in the financial statements to check whether it is not likely to mislead the user of the financial statements. We also take a look at the human resource element to assess its effectiveness while going through the issue of the control effectiveness that we examine. And lastly, some of the issues that we also look at here is what is the role of each of the ones that are providing assurance. Right from the senior management on page 86, what are the senior managers expected to do in a particular municipality in order to deal with, prevent or avert the growth of these levels of negative audit outcomes. Municipal managers and municipal entity chief executive officers, the mayors, the internal audit units, the audit committees, the coordinating and monitoring departments that are not in the day-to-day institution of local government, but have got a coordinating role, whether they are provincial or national institutions. And lastly, the municipal councils, the municipal public accounts committees, as well as the portfolio committees on local government. So that when you look at that section of this report, which deals with our assessment of the key instruments that are meant to deal with these audit outcomes, at least you can have a context of what are they expected to do, what did we find as lacking in their pursuit of these particular disciplines. So that is the overall audit report and the issues attached, as well as the context and the background to them. But I thought perhaps let me just deal lastly with what is on page 46 of the general report. And on page 46, we reporting on the issue that has been in the public domain over time in respect of the use of consulting services, where insofar as the financial reporting discipline is concerned, the amount is more or less the same as what was spent last year, but still high, as it sits at about just about 0.7 of a billion. Am I right? Yes. 0.7 of a billion in total. And these are costs that are incurred by municipalities overall towards the assistance and the services that they get from private sector institutions that assist them with their financial management disciplines. However, one also needs to draw attention to the fact that the money spent on the one side is one, but on the other side, there are also issues of our assessment of effectiveness, which is what is on page 46 on the right-hand side, where even if you go out and get the services of a consultant, if your ability to manage records as well as to manage the instruments through which you are going to report are not effective, then the consultant is not going to help. If the management of the project that leads to the generation of adequate and reliable financial statements is not strong, then the consultant is not going to work. Some of the consultants themselves did not deliver what was intended, and I guess we can examine the reasons for it. The lack of records and documents, among others, is that, and in some instances, the appointment of consultants becomes a knee-jerk reaction upon learning that you are headed towards a disaster in an audit, and then you wake up thinking that the solution is going to be to go and appoint and procure the services of a consultant, and then you end up with a lousy audit outcome afterwards, having spent that much money. That's what page 46 is about. It's an assessment that is not improving and has been at this level over a significant period of time. Let me leave the media release of these audit outcomes at that and say that we once again have noted a lack of movement over a period of time as we have assessed this thing over the 5-year period, but also taken a step at a year-on-year comparison of these audit outcomes, and we want to leave it at that in terms of the detail to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, AG. Colleagues will now take responses from the AG's guests. We'll start with Kopta, Deputy Minister Snell. After him, Councillor Mkwaku, Honorable Nyambi, and Honorable Smith will close.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the Auditor General for your report. Just to convey apologies on behalf of Minister William Mkhize, who is attending Cabinet. The Ministry of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs welcomes the audit improvements in some municipalities, and we express serious concerns regarding those who have regressed in light of the 2016-17 audit report released by the Auditor General today. We congratulate those 33 municipalities that have received unqualified audit opinions with no findings for the period 2016-17, and again express very, very serious concerns regarding the general regression in audit outcomes as announced by the Auditor General today. While the number remains very low, too low, COCTA does note from the Auditor General's report that a total of 145 or 56% of municipal audit outcomes are classified as unqualified. We do believe that this does represent a basis for national and provincial governments' ongoing support programs to improve financial management in municipalities. We're encouraged that with ongoing efforts to improve the municipal audit outcomes, there are municipalities who do get things right and do become examples for others to follow. We believe that the Auditor General's report is a very useful yardstick to gauge the general performance of municipalities, and it also corroborates COCTA's own assessment through our Back to Basics program that 1/3 of our municipalities are functioning well, 1/3 are getting many of the basics right, but experience serious challenges that they need to be supported in, and 1/3 of our municipalities are, quite frankly, dysfunctional. COCTA is striving to achieve the ideal municipality as one that contains the following ingredients. Firstly, to provide democratic and accountable government for local communities. Secondly, to be responsive to the needs of the local community. Thirdly, to ensure the provision of services to communities in a sustainable manner. Fourthly, to promote social and economic development. Fifth, to promote a safe and healthy environment. Sixth, to encourage the involvement of communities in matters of governance. Seventh, to facilitate a culture of public service and accountability amongst its staff. And lastly, to assign clear responsibilities to the municipal management and to ensure the coordination of administrative units and mechanisms. Given this constitutional and legislative mandate, the Auditor General report today indicates that there is an urgent need to intervene in distressed and dysfunctional municipalities as they have been confronted by a series of problems. Institutional capacity and widespread poverty have undermined the sustainability of local government, leading in some instances to a catastrophic breakdown in services. It's within this context that since joining COCTA in February of 2018, Minister Mkhize has set in motion various interventions through the Back to Basics program, which will contribute towards improvement of municipal audit outcomes. The Minister has engaged big business and black professionals to secure their support to distressed municipalities that often struggle with contract management and the inability to plan, deliver and operate and maintain infrastructure which is dependent on the competence of municipal officials. In the immediate term, the Minister has announced that COCTA is to deploy district technical support teams who are experts that will be deployed to municipalities to focus on infrastructure planning, delivery and maintenance, financial management support, governance and administration issues. These teams will be supported by the Rapid Response Technical Team, which will be assisting the financially distressed municipalities to develop financial recovery plans in collaboration with National Treasury that ensure that they are able to access the financial management conditional grant offered by National Treasury to promote reforms in financial management and build capacity in those municipalities. We are currently engaged in multidisciplinary, multi-departmental visits to provinces as part of COCTA's process to refine the interventions that we will be implementing. I can just mention that the Minister has already visited the Eastern Cape, and those provinces that are next in line would be North West and the Free State. All of these efforts are geared at ensuring that municipalities have effective governance systems in place and that qualified and competent senior officials are there to manage municipal finances with accountability within the applicable policies. Since the constitution of the new councils after the municipal elections, the Ministry has worked closely with other government agencies such as the National Treasury, the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, the Auditor General, SALGA and provincial governments to induct the new councillors and support them in discharging their oversight responsibilities effectively. This commitment remains. Working with the National Treasury and SALGA, the following measures are being implemented in municipalities to improve financial management. Firstly, the strengthening of municipal oversight structures such as municipal public account committees and municipal public disciplinary boards of the 10 municipalities with the highest unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The councillors serving in these structures have received training since November 2017. Secondly, the deployment of audit action plans for municipalities with adverse or disclaimer audit opinions to address the root causes of their audit findings. Progress has been noted since the engagement started in November 2017. Improving compliance with the supply chain management processes through the use of the central supplier database of the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer to prevent the awarding of municipal contracts to public servants as highlighted by the Auditor General's report. And fourth, management tools such as guides, circulars, financial capability maturity model, the financial norms and indicators, a guide and toolkit for municipal public account committees, standard operating procedures, etc. have been developed and are being implemented to address gaps in internal controls and financial management which promotes non-compliance with the Municipal Finance Management Act. COCTA will continue to provide the required support to all municipalities that are in distress to ensure that they deliver services as per their mandate. And we are equally prepared to intervene in those dysfunctional municipalities where such support does not yield the desired results. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.